Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. Today we are looking at Venom Issue 1, Legacy number 166. This is written by Donny Cates, with pencils by Ryan Stegman. Inker was J.P. Mayer. Colorist was Frank Martin. VC's Clayton Cowles was letterer. Now I really like the cover. That's very dynamic. I hate that stupid tongue though. I'll never forgive Eric Larson for giving Venom a tongue because it looks so dumb. But otherwise it's an awesome, very dynamic, spectacular cover. It makes me interested in it. And I picked this up because I had heard good things. It got recommended to me by a trusted source, so I thought, well, we'll give it a shot, and I'm glad I did. Now we've got Venom having nightmares. The actual symbiote is having nightmares, and when a symbiote is having nightmares, you need to worry. Now Eddie's having problems controlling the suit, and he's not real sure on why, and he's started having, it's starting to have these nightmares. He's having to take antipsychotics to kind of calm down the crazy in the suit. So that's been kind of an ongoing theme from what I could tell. I haven't really been following it. I just read that 3-issue arc with Kraven the Hunter, which was great, and I'm glad I read that before this, but it really doesn't give me a whole lot to work with as far as what's been going on, and I don't really care, quite honestly. So Venom tracks down Jack-O-Lantern and a couple other D-grade villains, but then things go kind of horribly wrong, and he turns into this like veiny red creature thing with a big spiral on its head, and somebody knocks him out and takes him hostage, and this guy starts interrogating him and says he needs his help. He thought it was Flash Thompson, but it's not. So I don't know really who this guy is. He may have been in some previous issues. I always thought the Flash Thompson stories looked really cool, but I never really read them. I might have to go back now and read those because the Space Knight storyline looked really cool. Although there's only one Space Knight, and that's Rom. Sorry. Anyway, so he tells him that there used to be a super secret Sim Soldier program that tried to bond humans with these symbiotes, and this is not the group that tried to do it with Eddie Brock in like a Project Rebirth way. No, this was some old program that's been around for a long time. And he shows him this picture that looks like Vietnam, so we don't really know how old this symbiote really is, and the guy points out that, you know, these other guys are still alive, so he wants him to go kind of find out what's going on. Eddie gets down there and runs into these creatures, and they all have that same weird spiral thing, and his symbiote freaks out on him, and it leaves him effectively defenseless, and they're talking in a weird language that he doesn't understand, but the symbiote does, and it's amazing, because Eddie gets really screwed up. He gets jabbed, and he's almost, he's kind of in and out of consciousness from the sound of it, and the symbiote is apologizing to him, and he's like, you have to breathe, you're dying, and it's a fantastic issue. I don't want to tell you too much because it would ruin the twist at the end, and oh my gosh, this is a great issue. I highly recommend this. I'm really liking Donny Cates. The stuff I've read of his seems really good, and the art in here is really good. I don't like Eddie with long hair, but this Ryan Stegman really draws the Venom suit really well. It's a very unique kind of style, very kind of Frank Miller-esque in a way, and I do like the style overall. I think Eddie would look a lot better with shorter hair though. He looks kind of silly with the long hair, and it really kind of detracts from him for me to take him seriously, because I keep thinking it's Sabretooth. Anyway, great issue, highly recommended. Go out and pick this up, even if you have to get the second printing or whatever. It was definitely worth the $4, or $5 rather. I think I paid $4 for it, but it was definitely worth $5, and I would have dropped that again to pick it up again. So I know issue 3 just came out. I've got issues 2 and 3 sitting here, so we're going to look at those next. Hopefully I'll have those done in the next day or so, and they'll be up as soon as I get them done. But I'm really looking forward to it, and I really like that they used good quality paper for the cover, which is a rarity for Marvel. So if you get a chance, definitely pick this up. That's just my opinion on it, and as always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing so you never miss an episode, and we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom Issue 2, Legacy number 167. This is from 2018, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, inker, Frank Martin, color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles, letterer, and the cover was by Ryan Stegman and Frank Martin. Edited by Devin Lewis. Alright, so this issue, we left with him getting impaled, effectively, by an alien creature similar to his own symbiotic life form. And while the Venom suit is trying to fix Eddie, we get a recap of his origin, and it's really cool the way that plays out over 3 or 4 pages, because not only are they retelling his origin, but we also get to see how the symbiote helps him to recover, and they kill 2 birds with 1 stone that way. Progresses the plot. So we cut back over to this guy Rex that hired him, and Venom is very unhappy with him. They think that Rex sent them there to die. The Venom suit freaks out, goes into that weird red spiral mode, and it seems like the suit might be infected with something, and it's not necessarily the suit's fault that it's acting this way. So then Rex tells us the story of what happened to him. He was in the war, which looks like Vietnam. They were pinned down by snipers, and they're trying to dig a trench to hide in, and all they find is some dead bodies, and all these people start dying. Rex tries to sacrifice himself by running out into sniper fire, and then a bunch of napalm gets dropped, and that's how he got all these scars on him. Well, they apparently recruited him on near death under the orders of what looks like Nick Fury, and he was bonded with part of this symbiote. Well, it turns out that what he was bonded with may have been part of a symbiote and not an actual unique symbiote, and that's what the other men in his unit may have been exposed with too. It's a little vague yet, but we're getting there. And it's got this giant monstrous thing stomping around New York now, and it's all because Venom accidentally unleashed it, not knowing the full story. So he's going out to try and fight it, but while he's heading out, it looks like Diversity Hires Spider-Man might be trying to stop him at the same time, and that's where we're hanging on for next issue. This was a great issue. It's really well written. I think the art style has a very unique look to it. It's got kind of like a Frank Miller influence, I think. My main complaints with the book are Eddie Brock's hair, because he looks like Sabretooth with the long hair, and the constant forced swearing. Now, in comic books, if you want to sell a book for teens, you can't use actual swear words. They insert symbols, of course, as most of you probably know. Unfortunately, that's very annoying to read. Just either substitute the word with the actual word or don't put it in. It's really annoying to try and read and guess what you're saying. It's usually fairly easy, but it's still a pain in the butt, and it's a waste of my time, and I don't really care for it. I think it's lazy storytelling. If you're having to use parameters, try and work within those parameters, because otherwise it comes off as kind of silly. And it's a dated technique that harkens back to the Comics Code Authority. Either put the swear word in and accept it, or don't and just write around it. I know it's a pain to do that. It's annoying. If you can't use the swear word because of company policy, figure something else out. That's my main complaint with the issue. Overall, fantastic book. I'm really excited to read issue 3, which I did pick up. It's sitting right here next to me waiting for me to finish this, so I'm definitely going to recommend issue 2. I'm real impressed with Donny Cates' work on this book and other books. It's showing that Marvel does still have some gems hidden in their talent pool. They're just choosing not to really highlight them, because honestly, if this book hadn't been recommended to me, I wouldn't have bothered. Venom isn't something normally that I'm interested in, and I have such little faith in Marvel producing a good book, but as it is now, I'm really excited to read this next issue. This is definitely a recommend, and hopefully the storyline continues to be good, but in the meantime, that'll do it for me. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up, and consider subscribing so you never miss an episode, and we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 3, Legacy number 168. Now this is the latest issue of the Ancient God storyline, whatever they're calling it now. Written by Donny Cates, Ryan Stegman on pencils, J.P. Mayer on ink. Color artist was Frank Martin. Letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. And the editor was Devin Lewis, with assistant editor Lauren Amaro. So Diversity Hires Spider-Man decided decided to attack Venom while there's a giant monster roaming around, and he got the worst end of that one. Lucky for him, Eddie's still in there and manages to control the symbiote a little bit, even though it's spazzing out with the red swirly thing on its head, and tells Spider-Man to kill him, and fake Spider-Man blasts him in the face with one of his energy things. I never saw a spider do that. Anyway, Miles starts beating on Eddie, even though Eddie's, effectively unarmed at that point, and Eddie has to knock him down and ask him what his problem is, because they've never met. And Miles says something about the fact that he hurt his mother. I don't really know much about Miles because I think he's a crap character, and he's just another replacement hero. So Eddie's like, look, I don't know what your problem is. We can work that out later. Right now we got a bigger problem to deal with. Can we deal with that? And he's like, okay. So he falls in line because, he can do no wrong because all these pathetic fake heroes do that. But Venom gets the idea of, hey, you know what would really work? Why don't you get in there and use that Venom Blast and do it from the inside? So he does, and it effectively destroys the construct, because that's kind of what it is. There's a creature inside there named Knull, and it drags fake Spider-Man out and kind of drops him and talks to Eddie and the symbiote. Apparently, this guy claims he's the god of symbiotes and purges the Venom symbiote of humanity because he says it's infected, and we're left with this image of this guy sitting on a throne with a bunch of symbiotes floating around him. I don't know why he has this dragon spider image on there. That really doesn't work for me because the spider imagery came from Spider-Man, but it's sort of mutated a little bit to look like a dragon. I don't like that. I think it's kind of lazy artistically. I would think the artist would want to challenge himself a little more to come up with something other than a spider type motif and just a lazy little twirl on the end to change it up. But the whole swirly thing with the primordial looking symbiotes, they look cool. But overall, this was a pretty good issue. I don't like Miles Morales that much. I think he's just another replacement diversity hire. He's just one of the first ones, and I think his entire character is boring and just pandering in general, so I don't like that. But he was functional here, if annoying. Overall, it was a good story. The art was pretty good. The way he's drawing mouths in this one and faces is a little rougher than previously. It's a little bit more manga-ish, and I don't particularly care for that, but I did like the art overall. So this continues to be a good book. I would recommend this issue despite the fact that another replacement hero is in, and it does reference where the Avengers and X-Men are and the Celestials falling from the skies. So this is taking place during Avengers issue 1 from 2018, so that is pretty nice that they explain why there aren't more people out helping, and I was glad to see that. So overall, this is a solid recommend. I didn't feel cheated for my $4. It's definitely one of the best Marvel books on the market right now, and I hope it continues to be really good. So we'll see how it plays out, but that'll do it for this one. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss any future reviews. If you want to help me get more comics to review, Patreon link is in the description and on the About page, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 4, legacy number 169. This is from the 2018 series, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer inker, Frank Martin color artist, BC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor was Lauren Amaro, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. So this issue is mostly world building. We get the symbiote god talking about how the symbiotes were created, and we see some celestials and how he was a creature of the void, and then they came and set the light in. He's telling Eddie Brock this through an avatar constructed of those previous symbiotes that we saw last issue, and we learn how he's connected to Earth and how Thor has encountered him before, and then we get a little bit of a interesting cliffhanger. The cover image is actually just a panel from the book. It's actually a full page, I guess, and I thought that was kind of lazy because usually they try and do something for second printings, because this is a second print, but it didn't really matter. The story was interesting. It's some good ideas, but I don't really know how well this is going to fit in with the main Marvel universe. And you know this character's going to be floating around for years and years, so I don't know. It was an okay story. I don't know how well it's going to fit into the main continuity, though. If Venom was its own series outside of the main Marvel 616, it would probably have worked better, but I see what they're going for. I just don't know how well it's
it's going to work. But it was an interesting book. I thought it was worth reading. I wouldn't pay a whole lot for it, but like most Marvel comics, it's really on crappy paper, and I'm not real impressed with it as far as quality, so I would probably just get it in trade paperback, but it's worth a couple of bucks. I just don't think it's worth cover price. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 5, Legacy number 170. This is from the 2018 series, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer inker, Frank Martin did the colors, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor was Lauren Amaro, editor Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe. After what happened last time, we find Miles Morales, the fake Spider-Man, smacking the crap out of Eddie as they're plummeting to their death. He had to make a split-second decision, and it seemed like the right idea at the time. Miles doesn't know how to make a spider web to make them glide like Spider-Man does, but thankfully the symbiote has a new power, and that is the ability to sprout wings. Apparently, when it connected with Knull last issue, it was able to absorb some new memories of certain powers that it used to have, and it also gave them sort of a connection to Knull that he'll be able to track them now. So Venom and Eddie ditch fake Spider-Man and they go looking for someone that can help, and that someone is Rex. And we learned a very interesting secret about Rex that was a little interesting, kind of changes the character. I think this was a last minute change, and they decided to have a team up, and he's got a lot of guns. It looks like they're going to try and fight the other symbiotes before they can get together and go free Knull. So overall, a pretty solid issue, where last issue was mostly history and world building, and we learned all about a planet full of symbiotes. That was a little bit goofy, but interesting at least. This was a lot more action-packed and a lot more happens. It's not as much world building and background, it's more getting to where we need to go. So a solid issue, a lot of fun, art's solid. If you like Ryan Stegman's art, it's pretty good, and it definitely moves things along quite nicely. So a lot of interesting stuff happens here, and the wings is an interesting addition to Venom. I don't know if I really like that, but we'll see how it plays out. I'd recommend this one, but so far this looks like something that will be better as trade paperbacks over time, because it'll be easier to get them all together, because this is a really long story apparently. But definitely worth reading. I thought it was fun. Paper quality is trash on the floppies, so another reason to get the trade. But an interesting story that I did enjoy. The cover is super boring though. That really doesn't tell you a whole lot other than, hey, look at these giant wings and the tiny guy they're attached to. So really underselling the book, but definitely worth checking out. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom Annual 1. This is from the 2018 series, and it features 4 short stories, so it's just a lazy anthology. Not one big adventure story like we used to get, with maybe a backup. Nah, it's just broken up into 4 vignettes that they probably couldn't fit in any other books. They're all kind of tied together though. First one is written by Donny Cates, illustrated by Kev Walker, colors by Chris Sotomayor. Round 2 is the next one, written by Dave Michelin, with Ron Lim and Scott Hanna on inks, Rochelle Rosenberg colors. Nobody Does It Better is written by Jeff Loveness. Teague Walker was the illustrator and Rochelle Rosenberg colorist. Unstoppable, the final story, and it's written by James Stokey, who also did the art. Letters for all the stories were VC's Travis Lanham. Cover art was by Paulo Soqueira and Rochelle Rosenberg. The variant cover with just Venom's face is by Bill Sienkiewicz. Lauren Amaro was the assistant editor, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. Alright, the first story is actually the bookends, and it's a bunch of supervillains at a bar talking about Venom, and Jack-o'-lantern is very scared of him, but then Black Cat comes in and tells her story about how she fought with Venom in this round 2, and she accidentally interrupted him trying to save some security guards who were being held hostage. And then we get the bartender telling a story about the time Venom came in and fought with Wolverine in the bar, and Wolverine effectively teaches Venom a moral lesson. Then we get the final story by one of the worst artists I've ever seen, as Juggernaut faces off with Venom, but haha, the narration doesn't match what we're seeing because the guy who's telling the story is totally biased in favor of Juggernaut. The Black Cat story is not bad. I thought it was pretty well done, and even the Wolverine story at least has a better resolution. It's a pretty decent fight story. The final one, though, is just really dumb, and the art in that is horrible. I don't know why this guy keeps getting work. It looks like Mad Magazine art. It looks like it's mocking the art form. The bookend story is okay. It's kind of implied one of the supervillains dies, but there's no evidence of that. It's just sort of implied. But everybody likes to say he got his head chewed off. It's not shown that that's what happens. Nobody references that happening, so I don't think that actually occurs, because what a lazy death if that is the case. I'd have to say the Wolverine story is probably the most important one in the book, but most of the art is kind of hit and miss. It does look like a lot of corners were being cut, except for the Black Cat story. That one is really solid throughout. The bookend storylines with the guys at the bar by Kev Walker, that art is really, really cartoonish looking, and people's faces look very bizarre in it, so I hated that. I'm not even a big fan of the art from the Wolverine story. It's mostly a little cartoonish and disproportionate, and Venom looks kind of fat in the entire thing, so I'd have to say the art really was not for me. The only one I really liked was the Black Cat storyline art, and that was Ron Lim. But nobody does a better art, made everybody look kind of weird and tubby, so I would say grab this out of a discount bin. Most of the stories were really well told. They're just not visually appealing, except for the Black Cat storyline. So I would have to say this isn't for me. This had nothing to do with anything going on in the Venom book at the time, and it doesn't even have one cohesive story. It's just a bunch of little stories that are being told at a bar, and it just didn't do anything for me. The covers don't relate to the story, and it looks deceptive. It looks like there's a lot more interesting going on, and for $5 it just wasn't worth it. The stories don't mean anything. They're largely throwaways. The Black Cat story and the Wolverine story had good impactful messaging if they would somehow be referenced later on, but this was just done as a cash grab. There's nothing here that seems to be impactful, except maybe the implied death at the end of the book, which is never shown or really referenced to be an actual death, and I don't think this is going to be a particularly memorable issue for anyone. So I would say you could skip this one. It's not really important to the story. If you're trying to hunt it down, I wouldn't pay anywhere near a cover price of $5 for it. I don't think it's worth it. And the paper quality's trash on top of that. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Web of Venom V Nam. Alright, the title is kind of dumb. I like the Web of Venom part. I think that'd be a cool second series for Venom, but V Nam is kind of stupid. Anyway, this is issue 1. It's really just a one-shot. I don't know why they don't tell you that, but it's just a one-shot. This is written by Donny Cates, art by Juanin Ramirez. Color artist was Felipe Sobrario. VC's Clayton Cowles was letterer, and the editor was Devin Lewis, assistant editor Lauren Amaro, executive editor Nick Lowe. Now, we learned some more history of what happened in Vietnam with Rex Strickland, and we saw that in the first story arc of the 2018 Venom series. For those of you that don't know, this is kind of a spin-off of that, and it's just recapping the Vietnam story, and it's told mainly through an interview. We learned that Nick Fury was involved, the original Nick Fury, not Sam Jackson Nick Fury, but David Hasselhoff Nick Fury. So we learned how they extracted part of the dragon and attached it to the soldiers. Things went bad, and, well, Nick Fury has to call in reinforcements in the way of who else? Logan. And it's actually, I thought, a pretty fun story. We learn a lot about what happened. The symbiotes go rogue. Strickland, Logan, and Fury have to kind of put everything back in place and try and stop them. I thought it was a great one-shot, actually. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I heard it was terrible, and honestly, I disagree. I thought it was a lot of fun. The name is dumb. V Nam. Yeah, Venom Nam. We get it. Ha ha ha. I think this would have made a really good 4-part series, because as a one-shot, it's a little condensed. That'd be my main complaint. But it would have made a cool 4-part story, and they could have treated it more like an actual military action. But for what it was, I didn't feel like I wasted my $5. I thought it was a pretty fun story. It was a good history piece to go along with that first story arc in Venom, and I thought it was worth picking up. So I'm going to recommend this. Overall, I would say the art is middle of the road. It's definitely got a manga influence, but it's pretty decent for what it is, and it worked for the story. But I really liked the story. I thought Donny Cates did a good job. I know they're doing some more of these one-shots. They're doing a Carnage one next. I don't know why they just didn't do these as miniseries or as a regular series, but I'm not in charge of that. That's a Marvel thing. But as far as one-shots go, it wasn't too bad. If you don't like the art style, you're probably going to feel a little more cheated, and I know a lot of people didn't like the story, but I thought it was a good tie-in. So that's just my take on it. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and consider subscribing so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel, Patreon links are on the About page and in the description, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 6, legacy number 171. This was written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer, Frank Martin color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin did the cover, edited by Devin Lewis, assistant editor Lauren Amaro, executive editor Nick Lowe. Now the cover's pretty cool actually. I still don't like Venom having that stupid tongue. I'll never forgive Eric Larson for that, but it is a cool cover. Eddie and his symbiote and Rex gear up for battle, and wow, this thing comes in hard. The Grendel goes right after him. It's a really cool 2-page spread where it comes in like a T-Rex head. Really cool. Then there's a huge knockdown drag out. Eddie loses a symbiote for a second and really is in some serious trouble, but things get resolved in a really gruesome way. Eddie gets seriously injured and things aren't looking good for him or the Venom symbiote, and they do lose an associate in the process. Overall, this was actually a really good issue. It's very action-packed. There's good conclusion to the story, and it's going to go into next issue with an interesting cliffhanger. So I'm really excited to see where it goes. This was a fun issue. I enjoyed it quite a bit. As I've said before, Stegman's art I find kind of strange, and generally I find his human characters to be a little blocky, but he does a really good job with the symbiotes. I think his art is getting better. So I like the way he does the Venom tendrils and all that, and the Grendel creature looked really cool. So great issue. It was a great roundup to the storyline, and I'm interested to see where it goes. So I'm going to pick up next issue. Paper quality is garbage on these because they're from the Arrow, and Marvel just started not caring and decided to cut every corner they could. So be aware of that. I mean, the issue is from 2018 and their paper quality has only improved slightly since then, but this is from the bad ink time. So be aware that you may get some ink on your hands or find covers that are smudged up. So I'll recommend getting it in trade. I think the first 6 issues are in the volume 1 trade, so definitely check that out. But yeah, absolutely a fun storyline, and this was worth it. I thought it was a good payoff and real heroic of Eddie in the story, so we actually get to see him being a hero. And yeah, he's an anti-hero, but he really puts himself on the line in this one, so really cool to see that. So I'm going to recommend it. It's good stuff. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 7, legacy number 172 from Marvel Comics. Written by Donny Cates, art by Iben Coelho, art by Andres Mosa, letters by VC's Clayton Cowles, cover art by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin, edited by Devin Lewis, assistant editor Lauren Amaro, executive editor Nick Lowe. So Eddie wakes up in what appears to be an interrogation room where a stranger is asking him a lot of questions. Now it turns turns out Eddie does not remember the past few weeks, and apparently he had been on the run, kind of going on animal instinct and being largely controlled by the symbiote. He apparently ran to his father's house in San Francisco, where there was this kid there named Dylan. He's not sure who this kid is or what his dad's treating him kind of indifferently, but we learn this guy that's interrogating him is named the Maker. Now, some of you know who that is from other comics. Others will come to discover something kind of annoying about him. But there's an important ending twist that is rather shocking. I did not know anything about this. Overall, this is a setup issue for the coming storyline. Now, there's a lot of detailing and world building here that is more plot development for the trade paperback. So it's a little bit of a throwaway issue. And for me, that just means it's not worth very much because it's just setting up things to come. So I wouldn't pay a lot for it, especially because the paper quality is trash like usual. But the art's okay. It's similar style to what Stegman does, but a little softer on the face lines, so you don't have that kind of blocky look. So if you like Stegman's art style, especially with Venom, this is a similar style in many respects, but without having people look very blocky. So I thought the art was okay, and it looks like it's going to be an interesting storyline. So I'll recommend it, but only if you can find it cheap or in trade paperback, because as an individual issue, there's really not enough here to justify $3 or $4. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 8, legacy number 173. This was written by Donny Cates, art by Aban Coelho, color art by Andres Mosa, letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. Ryan Stegman, JP Mayer, and Edgar Delgado were the cover artists. Lauren Amaro, assistant editor, Devin Lewis, editor, Nick Lowe, executive editor. After the stunning information that Eddie found out from the Maker last issue, we learned some interesting facts. Apparently, the people that wear the Venom suit end up with a residual trace of the suit in their system as a codex, and these codexes help the hive mind understand people or something. That's a little weird, but whatever, I get it. It's a plot device, and it's an interesting one. So the Maker wants to collect more samples from the corpse of a former host to the symbiote, and Eddie's not about to have that. So he ends up having to use the suit to kind of beat down the Maker and steal the codex, and that puts him right in the line of fire. And all these soldiers that he has to face down have anti-symbiote weaponry, but thanks to the codex that he just stole, he's able to take on a brief period of the persona of that person and use their skill set, which is pretty impressive. And he knows that the symbiote seemed to kind of prefer that host. That's gotta hurt. But Eddie does manage to do something interesting, and we get a little foreshadowing to the event that is coming, which is Absolute Carnage. Now, I've already reviewed those books before I read these, so those reviews should be available now. But this is building up to that, and there's some really cool stuff that comes out in this one. There is some action, not a huge action story, but they're definitely leading somewhere, and there's more revelations to come. Pretty solid issue, good middle story, not the best jumping on point. Last issue was a better jumping on point, but it'll work if you're just looking for something with some action and a little bit of story. But yeah, there was some really cool stuff in here. I liked it. The paper quality is garbage because it's from Marvel in 2018, but overall, yeah, definitely worth checking out. The art is good. It's very similar style to Ryan Stegman's, but a little bit of a cleaner, more simplistic look, and people's jawlines look way better, so I don't mind the artist. They did screw up a little bit with the headstones on the first 2 pages, because if you look, it says in memory, and then on the next page it says in loving memory, and then it goes back to in memory later on. So there's that. But pretty interesting storyline so far. I'm intrigued to see where it goes. So I'll recommend it. It looks like this one's probably going to be a better story arc to get in trade, but if you find it in a back issue bin for a reasonable price, I'd say pick it up, but because of the paper quality, I wouldn't pay a whole lot for it. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are all in the description, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Web of Venom Carnage Born issue 1. This is a one-shot from 2018, and this issue takes place between issues 8 and 9 of the 2018 Venom series. This was written by Donny Cates. Danilo Bayruth was the artist, Chris Peters color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover by Kyle Hotz and Jose Villarrubia. Ian Betterman was Lauren Amaro assistant editor, Devin Lewis editor, executive editor Nick Lowe. Cover's okay. Didn't really sell me on it. I thought this would be an ancillary throwaway, but this is actually a one-shot leading into Absolute Carnage. We get an overview of Cletus being born in the Ravencroft Institute and how he died at birth but was miraculously resurrected, only to have that experience, which he claims to remember, affect the rest of his life. And then we get a very brief overview of him getting freed and turning into Carnage, and then we jump over and find out that there's this cult of Knull, and they have these really crude cave paintings and stuff that they pray to, and they think that Carnage will lead them into some sort of golden age of darkness. So they were able to recover Cletus's body. He apparently had been killed out in space in some storyline I don't care about, and then he came down and crashed, was recovered by some government agencies, and they intercepted the body. And it was around that time that they learned about the sample that was taken after issue 6 and was stolen from the Maker in issue 7 of the regular Venom series, and that's what they're going to use to revive Carnage. So we get to see Carnage being resurrected and how he learns about the codexes. This is actually really important. It probably should have been labeled as a tie-in to Absolute Carnage, because that would have made more sense when I read Absolute Carnage, because I would have picked this up then. I didn't pay any attention to this issue on the newsstand when I read that story. This would have been nice to know, but Marvel just sort of expects you to know everything, and they do all these weird tie-in issues. Sometimes I guess they just don't bother to tell you that this book is important to that miniseries, so I mean, why would they want to have you buy an extra issue? Foolish. So this was a $5 issue. It's not worth that. The paper quality is total garbage, for one. Second of all, the art inside is very amateur hour, in my opinion. It's got a very indie style that just doesn't really work for me. It doesn't have that kind of Marvel look to it. It looks more like something you'd see from a small press printer. It also has this sort of Cult of Cthulhu knockoff feel, so there's a little bit of familiarity here that's kind of generic in a way. It just didn't really work for me. The whole Cult of Knull seems a little ham-fisted and almost lazy, so I didn't really care for that, but it was an okay issue. If you're going to go back and read Absolute Carnage, then you'll want to read this issue too, because this actually explains how Carnage comes back from the dead. And it's pretty interesting if you were reading the first 8 issues of the regular Venom series, which you'll want to do before reading Absolute Carnage. I would say that if you're going to read some Venom stuff and you want to read the Carnage issues, read the first 6 or 7 issues of Venom, then read Web of Venom Carnage Born, along with any of the other ancillary ones that took place before this. I know there was 1 or 2, that Vietnam one, but name escapes me off the top of my head. This definitely takes an important part of the Absolute Carnage storyline and puts it in here, so you'll want to know about that. That being said, it was just kind of a mediocre issue, not worth $5. Pick it up for $1 or $2 somewhere, or if it's included in a trade paperback somewhere for cheap. Otherwise, beyond wanting to know this information before reading Absolute Carnage, I don't think it's really worth it. So it's not worth $5 unless you're going to read Absolute Carnage. And it does explain who stole the Codex material from the Maker. That's it. That's all this is really good for. It's a good prelude to Absolute Carnage, but it's really not essential, but it is valuable information that they didn't tell you in the miniseries. And the fact they don't label this is pretty insulting. If you're going to read Absolute Carnage, I'd say pick this up, and if you were reading the regular Venom series, you'll probably want it too, just for the background information that this does kind of tie into where they're going right now with issues 8 and 9. After that, probably not worth it if you jumped in Venom later and you're not planning on catching up on Absolute Carnage. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring are in the description, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom Issue 9, Legacy number 174. This is from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer inker, Frank Martin color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Edgar Delgado. Assistant editor Lauren Amaro, edited by Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe. Cover's okay, doesn't tell you anything about what's going on in the book. In fact, it's a little confusing. What's going on is Eddie is heading back to San Francisco to try and figure out why he showed up there while he was unconscious and the Venom suit was effectively driving him. So he's taking the Venom symbiote with him, but it's being largely non-responsive beyond emotional reactions that seem to be based on what he's feeling. It's not talking to him, it seems to be either catatonic or gone as far as mental ability goes. And he's not dealing well with that. He doesn't have a lot of human connections, so the suit was kind of his life and sort of his best friend. So he's having a lot of separation anxiety and grief from that, and it's really difficult for him. We learned about several members of his family dying of cancer and how he was hit by a car as a kid and it bankrupted the family, and how his father resents him and doesn't like him, but he wants to try and at least make some kind of amends with his dad and have some sort of relationship, even if it's not a great one. So he goes to his father's house and he sees this kid Dylan there, and things don't go real well, and Eddie ends up having to flee the scene, but it doesn't look like things are quite as they appear, and Eddie's in a really tough spot. This was actually a really good issue, but not because of any action elements. It's very much a story building, world building issue where a lot of different things are being brought together and we learn a lot about Eddie's past. It's a solid read, but it's definitely not going to be for everyone, and it is very much setting things up for later storylines very clearly. So I thought it was good to learn a lot about Eddie, and we get a little bit of sympathy for him and why he has a temper problem and kind of where he comes from. It doesn't excuse his actions, but it certainly does add a lot of character depth to him, and I thought they did a really good job with it. The art's solid Stegman art. It's actually some of his better work. I'm not a huge fan of his art style, but I've grown to accept it and not hate it. It's just a little too anime-ish for me, but it is pretty well done, and this is definitely an improvement over a lot of his work previously. So I think Ryan Stegman's getting better as an artist and more refined in his technique and his style, and it really shines through in this issue. But the story is really good. It does provide a lot of background stuff that's going to probably play into future issues, and I'm intrigued to see where it goes. So I'll recommend this. Probably not going to be worth a lot of money, and definitely not really worth the $4 cover price unless you're heavily invested in Venom. So if you're a big Venom fan, this is a good issue for building Eddie Brock as a character, but realistically it's a little overpriced at $4. Worth checking out though, so if you can find it for less than the cover price, I would say pick it up. I thought it was interesting, and if you're going to read Venom, this is definitely an issue that will add depth to the storylines. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Web of Venom, Venom Unleashed, Issue 1. This is a one-shot from 2019, written by Ryan Stegman, pencils by Kyle Hotz and Juan Gideon, inks by Mark Daring, Scott Hanna, Livsley, Roberto Poggi, Victor Olazaba, and Juan Gideon. Colors by Dan Brown, Matt Yackey, Andrew Crossley, and Carlos Cabrera. Letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. Cover art by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. This takes place before Absolute Carnage and roughly between issues 9 and 10 of the regular Venom series from 2018. Eddie is sleeping in a hotel room and some people are coming to do bad things to him, and the Venom symbiote is kind of out of sorts. It's not really itself, and it seems to be acting more on instinct, and it's currently in the shape of a dog, which we saw in Venom issue 9. Well, it defends Eddie and discovers something interesting about these people, that they have ties to something greater. So the primitive primitive, almost mindless Venom uniform goes hunting, and it discovers some people working underground in these mech suits, and it frees them of these like brain worms, like Rathacon type things that are up people's noses, and it has to go around and try and stop these brain worms. And these are of course a lead-in because these are related to Carnage, and this is a lead-in to Absolute Carnage. It was a pretty interesting story, and it had way too many people working on this project, but it was pretty good. So I will recommend this, but the paper quality is so bad, I would recommend getting it out of either a discount bin or getting it in the trade paperback where it's going to collect a bunch of these one-shots and the larger narrative of Absolute Carnage. But it was a fun story. You need a little bit of background information about what's been going on in the regular Venom series, which is kind of the flaw with the Venom books right now, and that is going to be kind of obnoxious if you're just looking for a casual read. But even kind of as its own one-shot, it is a self-contained story, so you can get something out of it. You just won't get the full effect of it. But it's worth picking up and reading if you're a Venom fan. I didn't hate it or anything. I thought it was pretty fun. The art's not bad, and it does present an interesting tale that is leading into a larger story if you're interested in it. So I thought it was pretty solid read all around, especially for the larger narrative that they're constructing. So not a bad book, but considering the quality of the paper, buy it out of the discount bin or in trade, like I said. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 10. This is from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, inker, Frank Martin, color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles, letterer, Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin did the cover art, assistant editor Lauren Amaro, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. So Dylan and Eddie are at a cafe talking. This is really a long-winded conversation story. Now, this is Marvel in 2019. And so they had to sit around and have a long, boring conversation while eating. But it is full of plot. It's just very long-winded and probably could have been toned down. We finally learn what really happened with that car accident that Eddie was involved in, and he may have been a little bit more culpable than it was originally alluded to. And we learned that Eddie's father was a very aggressive individual who beat him, and apparently is doing the same to Dylan. And we also learned Eddie's motivations for why he wants to protect innocent people. And then it appears like Knull shows up and Eddie takes Venom form, but it's not exactly what it seems to be, and Eddie collapses and we learn some very drastic bad things about him. Now overall the story isn't bad, it just kind of took a long time to get where it needed to go, and a fair amount of this probably could have been cut and condensed down. So I would say probably 6 or 7 pages could have been cut from this issue, and they had to play the, oh, he got off the hook because his dad was rich and he's a young white person, so they had to play the white privilege card, which was really lazy storytelling. And even in a rich, affluent area, so a place like San Francisco probably wouldn't have been that easy to get off the hook for what he did. May have helped him reduce the crime, but I think they played it up a little too much. It was a little over the top. They could have dialed that back about 6 or 7 notches, and it would have been more effective. Plus, the fact that the scene went on a little too long probably didn't help its case any. Overall, it's an okay issue. I didn't have a problem with the general idea of what they were doing. Just the white privilege thing was lazy, and the whole thing was a little long. It could have been knocked down a few pages and probably put something more interesting in there other than people sitting around eating again. So this was just an issue of people sitting around. I like the core idea for this story, but it really needed better editing. So I'll recommend it if you can find it cheap, but the paper quality is trash. Cover's pretty cool, but there's a 3-page thing for Stan Lee, and the pages are all black except for a picture of Stan Lee. It's the laziest tribute in history. No respect to Stan Lee, and there's some ham-fisted white privilege nonsense in there. Overall, it's probably bargain bin material. So if you could get it that way, I would get it out of the bargain bin or get it in trade. I think this one is really kind of overblown as far as necessity to the storyline. The big reveal will be mentioned in the next issue, so if you miss this one, not a gigantic loss. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 11, legacy number 176. This is from the 2018 series from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Joshua Cassara and Ryan Stegman, inks by Joshua Cassara and J.P. Mayer. Frank Martin was the color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin did the cover. Lauren Amaro, assistant editor, Devin Lewis, editor, Nick Lowe, executive editor. Now I like the cover, it's a really good pinup, but it tells you absolutely nothing about what's happening in the book, which is a bit of a shame because this is a pretty interesting story. Eddie Brock is sitting in a waiting room when he's shown a flashback memory of his uncle dying of cancer, and then he seems to be having all these visions that may or may not be real, and he's trying to discern what is going on. Meanwhile, the Maker, who's this evil alternate universe version of Reed Richards, who's very annoying, and it's kind of a lazy character. He's trying to separate the symbiote from Eddie in theory to save him, but probably not because he's pretty evil seeming. Meanwhile, Dylan is trying to figure out what's going on, and that's when Eddie's dad shows up to get Dylan, and Dylan doesn't want to go with him. And we learn that the symbiote has been lying to Eddie about many things, and the real memories kind of come out, but these false memories are a very big betrayal of trust. The general concept of the story is good, but it ends up being a little bit disingenuous because Eddie and the suit, they're written more like a dysfunctional relationship than people that are so intimately entrusted to each other at this point that they should be well past this. So it's a little bit of a retrograde for the relationship of the characters of this Venom symbiote and Eddie Brock, but we do get a stunning revelation at the end of the issue that did propel it forward. Overall, this was probably a weaker installment than last issue. I get what they were going for, I just thought it was a little ham-fisted, and it doesn't really jive with the way the relationship would work between two symbiotic creatures. So I didn't think that it was particularly good in that front. It was written more as a human relationship than it would be a relationship of this type, at least to me. But the art was pretty standard, so if you like Stegman's art, you'll like this. And I didn't hate it, I just didn't think it was worth the cover price. So I would say pick it up out of a discount bin or in a collected trade. Plus the paper quality is really trash because Marvel doesn't give a crap anymore. So it's worth reading if you're a big Venom fan. It's just not as good as it could have been. I'll still recommend it if you could find it in a discount bin or you're picking up the trades. Beyond that, it was not the best installment of the series. It was probably one of the weakest I've read so far. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 12, legacy number 177. This is from the 2018 series from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, art by Joshua Cassara. Rain Burrito was the color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover by Ryan Stegman and Frank Martin. Assistant editors were Lauren Amaro and Danny Kazem. Devin Lewis, editor, Nick Lowe, executive editor. We learned Dylan's origin story and how he came to be in Eddie's dad's custody. His name's Carl, let's just go with that. And we also learned that the symbiote has been deceiving Eddie because of its own insecurities or some stupid crap like that. We learned that last issue. Well, now Carl is taking Dylan back home, and the symbiote is separated from Eddie, and it goes after Carl. And it has a long talk with Carl, if you could call it that, and it quickly changes Carl's tune a little bit, and we're left with an ending that is pretty sad. And it looks like we're gonna have War of the Realms tie-in next issue, but this was actually a pretty solid issue. My only complaint would be Carl came to his realization a little too quickly, but overall it was a pretty good issue. The art's pretty solid. This artist has a very similar style to Stegman's, but is a little bit more refined, I think, and he draws the Venom costume really well. I thought that was really cool. But I'm intrigued to see where the next issue goes. This issue was a little bit of a throwaway issue. There's some action, but most of the action is this sort of TV drama, family building nonsense. It's hard to describe without really ruining some of the elements in there, but overall I would say that it's better to get these in trade paperback than it is to get the individual issues, because the paper quality's trash and the story really needs a little bit more room to grow itself, and buying individual issues you kind of feel like you're just wasting money because not a lot happens for a few issues and then stuff picks up. So I would say if you want to read these, get them in trade paperback and do it cheap. It's not really worth the cover price, but if you can find a cheap copy of the trade, I think it'd be worth worth reading. It's got a lot of character development. It just takes a long time for anything action-oriented to happen. It's a little bit more Hallmark movie and a little less John Wick. They kind of merge the two a little more. It would be better, but they're going for the long burn so that they can collect it all in trade paperback and charge you more money a second time. So just cut to the chase and get it in trade. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Web of Venom Cult of Carnage Issue 1. This is a one-shot from Marvel Comics, and it's a lead-in to Absolute Carnage. Written by Frank Thierry, art by Danilo S. Bierruth, color art by Andreas Mosa, VC's Clayton Cowles letters, cover art by Joshua Cassara and Rain Burrito, assistant editors Lauren Amaro and Danny Kazem, edited by Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe. Now this came out in June of 2019, at least that's what's on the indicia. It's probably a few months before that. And it starts off with Misty Knight going to Doverton, Colorado to find John Jameson, who's gone missing. Now Jameson was sent to the town to investigate some weird happenings, and she finds him naked under some rubble, and that's when we start to recount what happened. He had been sent to town to figure out what's going on because a bunch of graves had been dug up and people's spines ripped out. And as we now know, these were the codexes that were in people's spines from when they were possessed by a symbiote. Now in this case, this is related to a mini-series from 2011 called Carnage USA, in which Carnage had taken over a whole town and some Avengers, and it was up to Spider-Man to stop them. Well, now there is a cult in the town that worships Knull, and they're not very helpful, so John has to try and figure out what's going on. And then the local sheriff gets kidnapped, John Manwolf's out, and bad things happen. Overall, this was actually kind of boring. Frank Thierry's a much better writer than this. The general concept is that this is a throwaway book. It's a very hackneyed, lazily written book with really awful dialogue. And it's all just to explain why Manwolf is possessed in the Absolute Carnage miniseries. Honestly, you could skip this. The art is trash. Misty Knight's head looks really big because of her bad hairdo, and the art just looks lazy. It looks like old 1950s advertising art. It's very throwaway. John looks really old most of the time. Manwolf looks ridiculous. Bad all around. Everything about this is trash except for the cover. Cover's well done, but the interior art is awful. The storytelling is at best lazy, like it's written for a paycheck. Nothing about this was entertaining. It was painful to read. It was long, it was boring, and it was $5 I'm not getting back. Paper quality's garbage. I'd be lucky to get 50 cents for this at a garage sale. So I would avoid this one. It's pretty worthless except to explain how some of the codexes got harvested and to explain how John ended up working for Carnage. This was just a waste of money. Don't bother, it's just not worth it. If you're gonna get this, get it in one of the trade paperbacks with some of the other garbage one-shots, because this was just a complete total waste of cash. And I wouldn't pay for it in either trade or single issue ever again. Just not worth the time. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 13, legacy number 178. This issue was written by Cullen Bunn, illustrated by Iban Coelho, colored by Andres Mosa, lettered by VC's Clayton Cowles. Assistant editors were Lauren Amaro and Danny Kazem, edited by Devin Lewis, Nick Lowe, executive editor. Cover art by Ryan Stegman, JP Mayer, and Frank Martin. Cover's actually really cool. That scene has nothing to do with what's going on in the book. It would have made a better story. So we pick up where we left off, surprisingly, with Dylan and Eddie on the run, and this time they're trying to dodge some crazy monsters because War of the Realms just suddenly started happening. No real synopsis of what's going on there. And Eddie is trying to get Dylan to a safe place because he knows of a safe house that was run by Rex that we saw back in Venom issue 1, and it's full of guns. But they have to get by some evil creatures, and Eddie has to do some pretty nasty things to get there, and he gets pretty messed up because he doesn't have the Venom Symbiote symbiote anymore. Well, that's when he runs into this witch lady that has a dreaming stone, and the dream stone gives Eddie a sort of symbiote costume, but it's not a thinking one. It doesn't have the intelligence. It just seems to be kind of a crude replica that's made from enchantments, and things don't go the way that weird witch lady thought they would, and she's got eyeballs in her hair. So Eddie goes on a little bit of a rampage, and another offer is placed to somebody else. This was an okay issue. The story was decent. Some of Cullen Bunn's better superhero work. He's not a real good superhero author. He's much better at horror. So I don't know why they interrupted Donny Cates' storyline to do this one, especially because Cullen Bunn would have had to know what's coming up and what was going on in Venom, and that seems like a lot of catch-up work to make somebody do when they could have just had the regular writer and artist on this. Speaking of the art, it's significantly inferior. I think it's a little more anime inspired, with people having like sweat lines and exaggerated proportions that don't really match, and it doesn't seem like it's anything special. It looks like it's pretty stock standard anime style art. I didn't care for it, but the colorist did a good job. The art's probably okay for the style it's in, but it doesn't look like it's anything stand out or particularly exciting. It just seems very mediocre for what anime art is. So I didn't care for the art, but the story was surprisingly decent, especially for a forced tie-in. It really throws off the tenor of the book, because this is just like a 3-issue excursion that has absolutely nothing to do with the storyline they've been meticulously building since issue 1. So I was a little bothered by that, but I will recommend it if you can pick it up cheap. I would just get the trade paperback with the entire story arc in it, because so far it doesn't look like it's particularly memorable, and because of the interruption it throws off the pacing, and that kind of ruins a lot of what they were doing. So I think that actually hurt it, but it's worth reading. I just won't pay a lot for it. It's bargain bin book material, and I know some of these issues have been going for a ridiculous amount of money online, like $7 and $8 and upward, and I think that's exorbitant. So I would say just buy the trade paperback for cheap and read the story arc that way. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom issue 14. This is from the 2018 series from Marvel Comics, written by Cullen Bunn, illustrated by Bon Coelho, colored by Andres Mosa, lettered by VC's Clayton Cowles, assistant editor Danny Kazem, edited by Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe. I have the Battle Lines variant cover by Max Lim. It's okay. It doesn't tell you anything about what's going on, and Carnage isn't even in this book, so it's kind of a waste of an image. Otherwise, it's pretty cool cover. So Eddie is using this enchanted fake symbiote armor to fight elves, I guess, because it's War of the Realms crossover, and Jack-o'-lantern shows up with a bunch of henchmen, including like dire wolves and giant troll type things. So Venom has to fight these giants and these other creatures and try and stop Jack-o'-lantern. It's not really working out in Eddie's favor, and the armor modifies itself once more, and it looks like this may be somebody's sinister plan all along. His medieval Asgardian armor looks kind of cool, but overall, this was a highly forgettable book. There was a lot of action, but it didn't make a lot of sense, and it was all fairly pointless. It's a very loose tie into War of the Realms and has almost nothing to do with anything. It's very much a side story, which I do appreciate on one hand, because then I don't have to go read War of the Realms, and if I was reading the War of the Realms miniseries, this would not be a mandatory tie-in. Still, it feels like it's a waste of 3 issues, maybe 4, and the story is just kind of boring. The dialogue is atrocious, too. So it's a very paint-by-numbers action story with not a lot of originality, and it's really, really bad dialogue. I would just skip this. If you're gonna read the War of the Realms tie-in, just buy it in trade paperback, really dirt cheap. Beyond that, this issue is pretty forgettable, and the paper quality is garbage. So I would say that although issue 14 here was an okay read if you pulled it out of a quarter bin, if you're paying more than that for it, you're probably gonna feel a little cheated. Cullen Bunn really should stick to horror comics and not try and do superhero stuff. It's not his forte, and this is a great example of that. So a pretty weak issue. Not the worst thing Marvel put out, but still pretty weak. And it's got a lot of Growflex, so you know it's lazy. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom issue 15, Legacy number 180, written by Cullen Bunn, illustrated by Aban Coelho, with Alberto Albuquerque and Roberto Poggi, colored by Andres Mosa, lettered by VC's Clayton Cowles, assistant editor Danny Kazem, edited by Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe. So this Dreamstone that was given to Eddie has changed again into more medieval looking armor, and Jack-o'-lantern, who also has a Dreamstone, is fighting against him, and it gets a bit silly. There's a lot of action, but Jack-o'-lantern backs off for no apparent reason, only for some fire creatures to come out, a couple of peons, and they go after some civilians, and Eddie has to try and fight them off. Why Jack-o'-lantern wouldn't use that to his advantage is a mystery for the ages, but then that somehow makes Eddie remember what he's supposed to be doing and gives him control over the Dreamstone again, and then he tries to get creative and uses the Dreamstone in a way that he thinks the witch wouldn't have anticipated, and somehow he's able to defeat Jack-o'-lantern that way, and they just sort of both forget about the Dreamstones and just move on with their day, I guess. And Eddie finds his way back to Dylan, and that just sort of wraps itself up somehow, and then things kind of return back to the normal storyline, I guess. This is a very forced interlude, and it's really, really obnoxious. I really hate when they interrupt main titles for these crossover events that clearly have nothing to do with the main storyline and were never alluded to. There was no build-up, just boom, you're in the middle of a crossover because it's necessary for us to make a cash grab. And Marvel's been doing that since Secret Wars 2. Overall, I thought the story was, at best, mediocre. The remnants of what happened to these Dreamstones will probably never be touched on ever again, but I don't think this is a particularly entertaining story. I didn't like the art, it's way too anime style. The fire creatures looked kind of cool, I guess, and Eddie's knight armor looked okay. It looked like something out of Skyrim, but overall the story was kind of pointless. It didn't really go anywhere. This is back issue bin material. This isn't something I'm gonna hunt down. It's something I'm gonna pull out of a dollar bin and just never read again. Something to kill a few minutes. So if you're looking to do something like that, yeah, it'd be worth grabbing for $1, but beyond that, it just wasn't particularly entertaining. It wasn't exciting. All the action beats were kind of missed, and I thought they were a little slow going. So every chance it had to build tension was just kind of sloughed off and forgotten about. There were no real stakes other than a handful of civilians, and even that seemed kind of forced. Like, okay, we need something to move the plot along slightly. Here's some random civilians that just showed up out of nowhere. So I don't think it was a particularly good story. It was just kind of tepid and mediocre. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, but I'm not going to revisit it. So if you find it in a dollar bin or something like that, then yeah, I would say check it out. Beyond that, I don't think it's worth hunting down. It wasn't particularly interesting, and the War of the Realms storyline was not very compelling. So I'm looking forward to getting back to the regular storyline and moving on with my day from this nonsense. It just was pretty forgettable and mediocre. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and Teespring store are in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Absolute Carnage, Symbiote of Vengeance, Issue 1. It's a one-shot. I don't know why they called it Issue 1. Now this issue takes place before Absolute Carnage Issue 1, written by Ed Brisson, Juan Frigeri, artist, Dano Sanchez Alamara, color artist, VC's Joe Caramunga, letterer, cover art by Philip Tan and John David Ramos, Chris Robinson, editor, Devin Lewis, consulting editor, Jordan D. White, senior editor. There's a lot of editors on this book. Okay, so we've got a female spirit of vengeance that's protecting this little town that I'm not even going to try and pronounce, that's in Nicaragua, when Carnage shows up. Apparently, this lady had been connected to Carnage at some point, and Johnny Blaze, being the king of hell, shows up to talk to Donny Cates, because Danny is still wandering around the mortal world, running a bar or something, and Johnny can't leave hell because he hasn't figured out how to use that power yet. Now, I think that whole storyline's a bit goofy. I don't
don't like that Johnny Blaze is the one trapped in hell running things still. It's following the events of the Doctor Strange Damnation storyline, and I thought that was kind of dumb, but whatever. I like Donny Cates, so he uses his Ghost Rider ability one more time to go down, and we learn that Carnage is there with like a support team of cultists, which, okay, and things go really horribly wrong, and we have a confrontation between Carnage and Ghost Rider. Well, it's an okay book. Paper quality's trash. The cover quality especially, it's internal paper. It's very, very thin, easily torn, and it's $5. This is going to be in your discount bin real soon. If you are shopping at your local comic shop and you want to pick this up out of a dollar bin, I would say that's overpriced. It's an okay book. The art is just middle of the road okay. Some of it's kind of crap. Ghost Rider looks really cool though, and Carnage doesn't look too bad, but the story is just mediocre. Everything about this is very average. It's not a terrible book. It's not a great book, but it's definitely not $5 good. It's more $1, $2 good. If I'd only paid about $3 for this, I'd probably been okay with it, and just, you know, middle of the road book, no big deal. But at $5, it's vastly overpriced. This is worse than an annual from the 90s. So I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It just exists. So I'm not going to recommend it just because it's overpriced for what you're getting. It is a self-contained story, and I am a big fan of those, but it's a boring story. Nobody is particularly interesting. There's not enough background information. I don't know who Alejandra is. They don't explain it other than that she was a Ghost Rider at some point. Yeah, well, who hasn't been? Ghost Rider's a lot like Spider-Man. There's spider people all over the place. There's half a dozen Ghost Riders because they want to check a bunch of PC box. So they just apparently inserted this woman as a Ghost Rider for diversity's sake, I guess. I don't know. They don't tell me anything about her. And why the guy with the car wasn't involved in this, I don't know. But I had no interest in this. I'm a big fan of Donny Cates as a Ghost Rider character. It should have been more about him. I understand this is an absolute Carnage tie-in, but as a tie-in, it's incredibly weak. Has really nothing to do with the main storyline, and it is a good kind of sidetrack like they used to do with these tie-ins, but I don't know, it was just a weak book. It wasn't exciting. The action scenes were paced very oddly. I thought the whole book was kind of rushed and a little boring. Could have been a lot better, could have been a lot worse, but as is, it's just a middle-of-the-road book. I didn't particularly care either way. It's very forgettable, and it's definitely not worth $5. So for me, this is a pass unless you can find it in a box for $1 or less. That being said, that's just my take on it. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Absolute Carnage Issue 1. This is of course from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer, color artist was Frank Martin, letters were done by VC's Clayton Cowles. I have the regular cover, which is by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. This was edited by Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe, assistant editor Danny Kazem. Alright, so we get kind of a recap of what's going on here. Apparently, there's a so-called god of the Symbiotes that was there before creation or something, and it's trapped on the planet of Symbiotes. It's a little overplayed at this point. I'm a little tired of like super ancient gods and whatnot. But we jump from this little recap thing to Eddie Brock being on the run for some reason, and he was separated from the Venom symbiote, but they make frenzies, and Carnage shows up to wreak havoc on Eddie's day, and oh man, it is not good. And he has to go get help from an unlikely source, and that of course is Peter Parker, the Amazing Spider-Man. Now of course they have a long and storied history, but Peter is open to listening to what he has to say. This kid that's with Brock is also a concern, but that's actually a really well done story as far as I could tell. I'm a little behind on Venom, but this book was really kind of catching me up a little bit. This really seems to take place outside of the main Venom book, so you don't
have to have been reading Venom to know what's going on here. Well, anyway, they visit the Maker, and Spider-Man learns that his name's Reed Richards from an alternate universe, which I think is the Ultimates universe. And he's kind of sinister in a lot of ways. Apparently, Carnage is after what they call codexes, which are embedded in the DNA of everybody who's ever worn this Venom symbiote, which is way too many people. In order to attune this machine that alternate universe Reed Richards made, they have to go get a certain individual, and that is really where things pick up. This book was fantastic. I'm not a huge fan of Stegman's art style, but I do recognize that he's very talented, and I do like the way he draws Venom, which I would prefer not to see Venom's tongue all the time. I will never forgive Eric Larson for that, but this was a really well done story. I've been really not happy with Donny Cates' work lately, especially on Guardians of the Galaxy, but this was great. This was obviously a labor of love. He seems to really like Venom quite a bit, and I liked his characterization of Spider-Man, so I was real impressed with this book. Is it worth $8? No comic book is worth $8 cover price new. That's just not gonna happen. Could this have been a little shorter? Yeah, there's things they probably could have cut out, but the $8 cover price is really hurting my recommendation on this. I'll still recommend it, but I would recommend buying it for a lower price or waiting for the trade paperback. $8 is just way too expensive, and the more we send the message to Marvel that that's unacceptable, the less likely that is to happen in the future. Especially with like 20 alternate covers or whatever. There's a ton of alternate covers for this, and it's clearly just a cash grab. So if you could pick this up, do it, but I would definitely recommend not paying $8 for it. We can't let them keep tricking us into paying that kind of money. Thankfully, I get a discount at my comic shop, but it's still a ridiculous amount of money for one issue, even if you do get a discount. Like I said, I'd recommend it, but not at cover price. But that's just my opinion. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 16, legacy number 181. This is from Marvel Comics. Written by Donny Cates, art by Juan Gideon. Jesus Bertov was the color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer. Cover art by Joshua Cassara and Rain Burrito. I have the Carnage-sized variant cover by Ron Lim and Israel Silva. Assistant editor Danny Kazem, edited by Devin Lewis. Executive editor Nick Lowe. This cover's boring. Doesn't do anything for me. It's just a lazy kind of pin. Alright, so we got Eddie feeling sorry for himself, moping down the street, recapping everything for like 4 pages, including War of the Realms, which is not noted in the book anywhere. They reference it as if you're supposed to know what they're talking about. And with so many events going on at Marvel on a pretty much quarterly basis, you're not going to be able to keep track of this a year or two after it happened. So it turns out that Dylan has a fever and he needs some medication and some soup. And Eddie has to go out and do something about it. Well, he tries to get a job with a friend of his that used to be an intern, probably at the Daily Planet, and the guy wants to give him a chance, but Eddie's pretty toxic apparently, and the guy's only thing is, well, look, if you can do something about finding some information on these missing kids that apparently disappeared during War of the Realms, you can get some kind of work. So Eddie goes to some random place and kicks in the door, and of course his hunch is right. There's a couple of Carnageized people there, and he gets in a pretty cool fight scene, and it turns out there is a Carnageized former villain of his who's supposed to be dead, and Eddie's got to take him down. It was an okay story, but the art is pretty weak. Very immature, the proportions don't seem to fit. At one point, the way Eddie looks like he's got lats that just are unnatural and unhealthy looking. And there's these weird sequences where Venom's voice is in his head telling him to do stuff, and they really don't fit or make a lot of sense that this is some sort of thought pattern. Just didn't like the art, and those little story elements were a little odd, but overall it was an okay story. Complete story overall, kind of trying to get you up to speed on what's going on with Eddie and Dylan. I thought it was okay, but the art really does hurt it quite a bit because the proportionality is very weird, and it started looking like a Max comic book from the 90s, and not in a good way. But this is a lead in to Absolute Carnage, so that storyline picks up right after this issue. So overall it was okay, but I don't think it'd be worth more than a couple bucks. Paper quality's garbage, the art wasn't that good. I wouldn't pay very much for it. If you really want this issue, I'd get get it in trade paperback or grab it out of a discount bin, because if you pay more than cover price for it, you might feel a little cheated. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, be sure to share it around on your social media or pick yourself something up from the Teespring store. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello, and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Absolute Carnage, Issue 2, written by Donny Cates, pencilers was Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer, color artist Frank Martin, letters were by VC's Clayton Cowles. I have the Holtz Connecting variant cover. None of these people appear in the book, but it's a decent cover, and this one was by Kyle Holtz and Dan Brown. The assistant editor was Danny Kazem, editor Devin Lewis, Nick Lowe, executive editor. We pick up where we left off with Venom and Spider-Man facing off with Carnage and a corrupted prisoner who is probably going to play an important character later in the story. Spider-Man and Venom realize that they are completely outmanned and they have to escape, and Peter actually gives a really good take on their situation. They know they're outgunned, but he's still willing to persevere. And it really shows that Donny Cates understands Spider-Man pretty well, or at least seems to. And we see a little bit of what's going on with the Maker. There's a reference that there's something that happened in Venom issue 17 that kind of plays into this. Thankfully, the peripheral issues don't seem to be where the real story is happening. It seems to actually be contained in this miniseries, which I like. I don't want to have to buy the other books. I want those to be optional because most of them are going to be trash, which is generally how Marvel seems to do things these days. But this is the old style of telling a miniseries where any interconnecting issues that are tie-ins are just that. They're extra tie-ins that you could get to supplement the main story, which is happening in the miniseries. And I missed that, so this was really good to see. The story as to what Venom is doing, collecting these codexes, is pretty interesting, and we see Miles Morales and Scorpion fighting off a horde of Carnage drones sort of things, but Venom shows up to help out and things go really horribly. But all in all, it was a solid issue. My main complaint is the constant forced swearing. Now, in Marvel books, they don't publish the swearing very often, so the graphics are there with the little symbols and everything, and I absolutely hate that. None of this was necessary. It was all completely just for effect, and it's a really bad sign of lazy writing to me, because it says that you have restrictions, but you refuse to work within those and work around the situation with better dialogue. So I found that to be the most irritating, because it happens a lot, especially in Donny Cates' work. He seems to really enjoy throwing swear words in because he thinks it makes effect or something, and it never really works, because when you substitute the swear word for the symbols, people still know what you're saying, but it looks really lazy, especially when the word isn't necessary. It's not actually as effective as you seem to think it is. So that's my main complaint about the issue. Otherwise, I thought it was fun. It's a pretty solid book. Is it really worth the $5? Probably not, but I had fun reading it, so I'm gonna recommend it. You'll definitely want to read issue 1 before you read this so that you have a better understanding of what's going on, because it doesn't exactly bring you up to speed. You definitely have to have read issue 1 to get the full effect of this issue. But it's a solid issue. Spider-Man is handled very maturely, very much like Peter Parker used to be handled, and Venom is handled pretty well too. Donny Cates did a great job, except for the forced lazy swearing. Otherwise, it's a solid issue, so high recommendation here. If you get a chance to pick it up, do so. I would recommend it, but you're going to have to get issue 1 to really know what's going on. And we don't see a lot of the heroes that you see on the cover image in this issue, but still worth checking out. Hopefully the next issue is at least as good as this one, but we'll see. But in the meantime, that's just my opinion. That's going to do it for this episode. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page, and we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 17, legacy number 182. This issue was written by Donny Cates with art by Iben Coelho. Rain Burrito was the color artist. VC's Clayton Cowles letterer. Kyle Holtz and Dan Brown did the cover art. Assistant editor Danny Kazem. Devin Lewis editor. Nick Lowe executive editor. Cover's okay. I don't like the tongue thing. Beyond that, it's fine. That scene does not happen in this issue though. Deceptive. So this issue takes place during Absolute Carnage, although it's never told to to you in the book that that's what is happening. You get a little bit of information about Spider-Man and Venom being at Ravencroft, but there's no citation telling you that this takes place during Absolute Carnage. So if you pick this up later, after that storyline is concluded, you have no way of knowing to go back and pick up that storyline. So Marvel just cost themselves some money. Now we really largely are focusing on Dylan and Normie, who is an Osborn, a young Osborn, not Norman Osborn, and the Maker. And the Maker is, of course, an alternate universe Reed Richards, which is never addressed or explained in here who this guy is. I don't even think they call him the Maker. They just sort of like, here's a guy, you should know who he is, idiot. So there's no way of knowing what's going on, really, other than the little stupid synopsis thing at the very front, which really tells you nothing. It doesn't address who Dylan is, it doesn't address who Normie is, it doesn't address who the Maker is. Well, the Maker has completed his machine to extract codexes from former Symbiote wearers, which is a large number of people, including many heroes. None of that's really explained what any of this is, and that is when they are set upon by some symbiotes. And those are, of course, the Foundation symbiotes like Scream and Riot and those. And the Maker, who is very much an amoral person, has to deal with them largely on his own. But things aren't looking good, and we get a rather interesting twist ending, so we'll see how that plays out. Overall, it was a good issue if you were reading Absolute Carnage. If you're not, this is going to make zero sense as to what's going on and who the Maker is. You wouldn't know he was Reed Richards except to kind of infer it, but you would have no information about his background, who he is, beyond that. So I think this is a really big mistake on Marvel's part, but it follows a trend. They're really good at making a lot of mistakes. And at the top of the cover, it says Absolute Carnage tie-in, but it doesn't give you any update information by the editor like you used to get. And I think that's a really big mistake not to put that in. It's cross-promotion. So if you're buying Venom and you forgot about Absolute Carnage, which who would blame you, it would be very easy to grab this out of a discount bin or a back issue box and say, oh yeah, I'll pay a couple bucks for this and I like Venom. But then you have no idea what's going on because you didn't know this was part of a tie-in, and they end up losing money because maybe you would have bought the trade paperback too. You were just filling in gaps in your collection, you forgot this was an event and maybe didn't think it would tie in. But yeah, it's kind of a foolish error on their part for planning, and it just makes their editors look really lazy. But I would recommend this if you're going to read the main Venom title from the beginning, because this has been building up for a while, and you would absolutely have to read Absolute Carnage, which I already did review, and those reviews should be posted already. I'll try and put a link in. So I'd recommend it, but since it's a tie-in issue, I don't think you should pay very much for it. And if you get the Absolute Carnage trade paperback, hopefully these issues would be included, but I highly doubt it. So it does fill in some gaps in that story, and that's about the main reason to pick it up. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. And of course, as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Absolute Carnage issue 3. This is written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer, color artist Frank Martin, letterer VC's Clayton Cowles, cover art by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. I thought the cover was kind of boring. It's a pinup and it's not really interesting. Doesn't tell me anything about what's going on. It's just sort of, I don't know, kind of silly with the gigantic Carnage there. I don't really get it. Plus Captain America's face looks really weird. It's alright. This is a $5 book, so expectations are pretty high, but flipping the book and it really hits the ground running. We pick up where we left off with Miles Morales being corrupted. Yeah, I said Miles Morales. I don't like that character. I think he's dumb. That'll win me a lot of favors, I'm sure. Now, the Venom symbiote is actually starting to rebel against Eddie a little bit. Eddie's trying to save the kid and save Scorpion at the same time, but the suit wants to go right after the Carnage that's in front of him. But, you know, things are going south. Unfortunately, Eddie has to run, and he gets back to his safe house. The Maker's gone, but there's some other people there. There's a good conversation between Spider-Man and Eddie, and Eddie does a really jerk thing in a way, but nobody's gonna know about it because it's a long story and I don't want to ruin any twists. Carnage shows up in a really devious way, and things go really south really fast, and it leaves
leaves on a pretty interesting twist ending that is going to really make it, the next issue, very, very exciting, I think. There's a lot going on in this issue. It's pretty well paced. Again, the most annoying thing is the lazy use of graphics. If you can't use the swear word, just use something else. Rewrite your sentence for the same effect. It's a sign of lazy writing, Donny. It really is. But overall, this is pretty well written except for the lazy swearing. Just do something else, guys. Come on, it's not that complicated. Plotting's good, story's good. I would definitely recommend this. Yeah, you probably have to have a little bit of familiarity with the Venom series so far and the web of Venom stuff that went on. That's fine. I don't think you actually need that much of that to really enjoy the series. I think it's a good action series, and you could just kind of have fun reading it. If you have read Venom, great, awesome. If not, I think you'll have fun reading it anyway, just as Carnage being a complete psycho and going around causing problems for everyone. But it's a good book. I thought it was fun. Is it worth $5? Probably not, but I did enjoy it. I had fun reading it, and I am looking forward to the next issue. Just not looking forward to putting down $5 for it. I would have felt more comfortable paying $4 for this, and I probably won't be disappointed by that, but $5 is a bit much. So I'd have to say it's a good story, but you might want to wait for the trade paperback and get that off of Amazon or something for less than the price of the single issues, because although I am enjoying this series, $5 a piece is a hefty price to pay for it. But the art's okay, the story's good, so if you have no problem dropping $5 on a comic, this probably be entertaining to you. But that's just my take. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 18, legacy number 183. This issue was written by Donny Cates, art by Iben Coelho, Rain Brito's the color artist, VC's Clayton Cowell's letters, cover art by Kyle Hotz and Dan Brown, assistant editor Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. So we get a little bit of history on one of the symbiote characters and how he discovered the planet of symbiotes and realized there was some evil there that was coming toward Earth, so he goes to Earth to try and help and ends up finding Dylan and Normie, which we learned at the end of last issue. So we also find out that his host is long dead and horrible things happen. The Maker ends up in control over the symbiotes and begins torturing their hosts to try and remove the codexes, and Dylan and Normie have to make a decision, and unfortunately that kind of backfires on them and they are being chased by a newly found host for the symbiotes. Thankfully there is an interesting twist at the end of the issue, and we learned something interesting, maybe afoot with Dylan, but we also learned things are picking up. This is obviously a tie-in to Absolute Carnage. It says it on the cover, but it doesn't really tell you what issues this takes place between, that sort of thing. There's nothing in the book to really update you on what's going on. The little blurb at the front is, as usual, a gigantic waste of space and paper. So overall, it's an okay addition to the Absolute Carnage storyline. It does fill in some gaps, and it picks up where last issue left off, but as its own thing, it's really not going to be very interesting because you need to have read issues of Absolute Carnage to get the most out of this. So if you're not going to read Absolute Carnage, I would skip this. It's a real shame they didn't put more references to it in there to try and get you excited to go pick that up too. They're kind of leaving sales on the table at that point. I think there was one reference to Absolute Carnage issue 2, but they really should have kind of updated people more so they could kind of encourage people to go pick it up. So it was an okay story. The Maker's an overused, boring character. He's one of those super godlike characters they've been doing in the last couple of years, and it's really obnoxious. But I will recommend it if you can find it cheap and you're going to read Absolute Carnage. If you're not going to read Absolute Carnage, you might as well just skip it. But pick it up cheap. Don't pay cover price. It's not really worth it, especially because paper quality's trash. The art's better in this one than it has been in several of the other issues. I don't like Iben's style. It's very anime, so there is that too to be aware of. I just just not a huge fan, but he draws symbiotes really well. My cover is the second printing cover, which is just part of the regular book. So, correction, the cover is by Iban Coelho, because it's misleading. It doesn't correct that in the text. So yeah, that's kind of my ruling on it. Get it out of a bargain bin. It's okay. It's just not stellar, and it's not particularly memorable if you haven't read Absolute Carnage. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Patreon, Streamlabs, and of course the Teespring store are in the description, or you could just share it around on your social media. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Absolute Carnage issue 4. This is a mini-series from 2019 from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman. Inkers were J.P. Mayer, Jay Leaston, and Ryan Stegman. Color art by Frank Martin. Letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. I have the regular cover, I think, which is by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. It's kind of a generic cover. It actually conveys a little bit more than you think. I don't think that's supposed to be blood on Venom, but that's what it looks like, and it doesn't really work. Anyway, Venom has taken over the Hulk, and he's duking it out with Carnage, leaving Eddie without the symbiote, and it's him and Spider-Man trying to save these two kids and protect the Avengers. Well, a lot more is going on than you think, because while Carnage is fighting the Alkalite drone things, and Miles Morales start going after Eddie, who's trying to distract them long enough for the Avengers to get out of the chamber, and things go really badly all around. Turns out the Maker lied too. The machine he built doesn't do exactly what they said. It's a really tense issue. There's a lot going on here. Some crazy stuff happens. Things really get out of hand really fast, and there's a couple of twists and turns I'm not going to reveal, but they're really good. This is the best issue of this series, hands down. This was a solid book. The major disappointment I had with this was the Graflex. If you can't use the swear word, don't write it, okay? It's that simple. It's just lazy to do it this way, where you gotta have the little symbols instead of the naughty word. Just use a different phrase. But all in all, this was a great book. Highly recommend this series so far. I've had a lot of fun reading it. It's way better than I thought it was going to be. You can really tell Donny Cates really likes the character of Venom, and even Spider-Man he handles very well. I would actually rather see Donny Cates writing The Amazing Spider-Man than Nick Spencer, because I've really been disappointed with everything I've read of Nick Spencer's run on Spider-Man. But Donny Cates has a much better grasp on the character and his personality, and it really comes through here. If you get a chance to pick up this miniseries, I would definitely say do it if you're going to read some of the other Venom books. You probably won't get as much out of it if you didn't read the ongoing Venom series from issues 1 through about 17 or 18. You'll get a lot more out of it then, but I think you can enjoy this miniseries, just not as much if you haven't read those. It does a pretty decent job kind of getting you on board with it, and it's pretty well done, so I've enjoyed it. Donny Cates is kind of hit and miss sometimes, but this has been really good work. It's worth reading. I don't know if it's going to be worth the cover price to everyone, but I would say it's easily worth $3 or $4 per issue. $5 might be a bit much if you're not a big Venom fan, but it might be worth picking up in trade paperback too. We'll see how it plays out at the end. But so far, high quality work. This is a great issue. That being said, that's just my take on it. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 19, legacy number 184. This is from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, Iban Coelho, artist, Rain Burrito, color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles, letterer, Kyle Hotz and Dan Brown did the cover, Danny Kazem, assistant editor, Devin Lewis, editor, Nick Lowe, executive editor. Cover's pretty cool. It has nothing to do with the story. Venom is barely in this issue. This does tie into the Absolute Carnage storyline though. We get a little bit of an update on that to kind of fill people in. And then we cut back to the action where a couple of superheroes are saving Normie and Dylan, and they have to face off with the Maker, and Captain America is getting his butt kicked pretty good. And Dylan ends up freeing Sleeper to try and help out, but they can't bond for some reason, and obviously that's an ongoing plot thread. But he shows up to help out with Sleeper and kind of forces Sleeper to do some stuff against his will, and he gets lectured about that later. And the issue sort of wraps up with Venom coming back into things, and we get some foreshadowing as to what's going on with Dylan. Overall, this was a pretty decent issue, but you really need to read Absolute Carnage to know what any of this has to do with anything. If you've been reading Venom for a while and are caught up with what's going on in Absolute Carnage, then this will be fine, but the average person grabbing this issue and not having read any of this is not going to have any idea what's going on. So it's a good installment in the series, but not a good standalone, and definitely not a good jumping on point. So I'll recommend it if you're going to read the Venom series, especially the Absolute Carnage storyline, but otherwise it's kind of a miss. And the paper quality is trash, so get it in trade paperback if you're that interested. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out, you can share the video around on your social media, or buy yourself something nice from the Teespring store. If you'd like to support the channel through monetary means, you can do a one-time donation via PayPal through Streamlabs, or support the channel monthly on Patreon and get access to exclusive videos. Those links are all in the description, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello, and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Absolute Carnage issue 5. This is the final part of the miniseries from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer and Jay Liston, color art by Frank Martin, letters by VC's Clayton Cowles, flashback art by Mark Bagley and John Dell, cover by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. Cover's actually pretty good because this kind of does happen. This is a very action-packed issue. While Eddie tries to regain the symbiote from Carnage, as well as fend off the attacking Hive, the Avengers finally gets him back up, and the tide starts to turn a little bit. Eddie makes a very harsh decision, and it costs him in the end, and revelations are made, and we're left actually with a little bit of a cliffhanger, but some resolution. I didn't like that there is a cliffhanger ending to this. I don't think that worked really well for a miniseries. It doesn't tell the whole story that way. You feel a little cheated, and it sets up future events, which honestly felt kind of cheap. But overall, it's not a bad story. The miniseries is pretty good. It's more of an add-on to the regular Venom series, the way that it plays out in the end, but I thought it was worth reading. It was fun. Was it $5 good? This issue wasn't. It was a fairly weak ending. There is a MacGuffin with the kid that I thought needed explained and was a little lazy as far as writing goes. So I will recommend it, but I don't think I'm going to pick it up in trade paperback. I'm glad I did read it because I was enjoying Donny Cates' Venom series, but this was definitely a very weak ending, and it left a little bit to be desired. It set itself up for a sequel, which I didn't really care for. I thought that was just lazy writing, and there's some Groflicks in there, which really annoys me these days. But overall, it wasn't bad. The art's pretty good. It's solid, although Spider-Man's mask heals itself somehow. That's not explained, because early on, the bottom half of his mask is ripped when he's fighting with Norman, but then it magically heals itself at the end of the book. So who knows? Maybe he had a spare in his back pocket. That's something editorial should have caught. And editors at Marvel seem to be more of an honorarium than an actual job title. So I think this was an okay issue, but it was a weak ending for the miniseries because nothing really got wrapped up. Overall, the miniseries was good. So I'd recommend checking it out, but I don't think I'd buy it in trade because you'll feel a little cheated for the price. You could probably pick up the back issues reasonably cheap and less than the $5 cover price, so I'd recommend reading it that way. That being said, that's just my opinion. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 20, legacy number 185. This issue was written by Donny Cates, art by Aban Coelho and Zay Carlos, color art by Rain Burrito, letters by VC's Clayton Cowles, cover art by Kyle Hotz and Dan Brown, assistant editor Danny Kazem, edited by Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe. The cover's kind of boring, it's a little too abstract for me, and although this is kind of a loose tie-in to Absolute Carnage, it's really just an epilogue. So we learn the fate of the Maker and how he's been studying the symbiotes for a specific reason, and he knows about Dylan's strange abilities, and he seems to be a product of a human fetus with symbiotic abilities, and he's a new step forward in some kind of defense system they have. Then we look over at Eddie and Dylan, and there's actually a really good emotional scene there. Dylan thinks he was abandoned, and Eddie's trying to tell him, I didn't know about you. Then we go back over to the Maker, and we learn who he's working for, and he brings something over from his universe. Overall, I thought this was a pretty pointless issue. There's a handful of things in here that are useful that really could have been summed up a lot faster in a lot less space, and a lot more succinctly. Yeah, the dialogue and stuff like that is well done for what it is, but this is absolutely middle story. It's really an end cap to Absolute Carnage and a lead into the Maker trying to go back to the Ultimate Marvel Universe, which I wish he would because this character's stupid and annoying. And his weird head looks like there's a giant poop emoji sitting on top of him, and I find it disturbingly stupid looking and weird. But I was never a fan of the Ultimate Marvel Universe because I thought it was just really lazy fan fiction disguised as a new comic universe. So the Maker is just kind of pointless to me and a little ridiculous that he keeps showing up. I don't know if he's going to be in the next issue or not, but this issue, if you read Absolute Carnage, you could just skip this issue. It has a few minor points, but it's not something that's major to the book as far as I could tell, and you could kind of take it or leave it. It was an okay read, but I'm not happy that it's, a $4 cover price. This is something that you could pull out of a dollar bin and still feel a little cheated out of, because there's just a bunch of talking. There's no combat in here. There's no action, no adventure. It's just all wrap up of Absolute Carnage and lead into some other storyline for the Maker. This isn't a book about the Maker. It says Venom on it. There's like 5 pages of Eddie Brock in here. So I would say this one isn't an absolute necessary to track down. If you're going to read Absolute Carnage, I would read it in trade and just skip this one unless you're going to start picking up the series of Venom with issue 21. If you've been reading Venom, you might want to read it, but I don't think it's one that you absolutely need to have. It's not a key issue as far as I can tell. So not really recommending this one right now unless you could get it really cheap. Also, the art is pretty hit and miss. A lot of it looks very anime and manga-ish. The Maker's face makes him look like he varies between 12 and 25, so I can't tell how old he is, and it's really distracting with that weird hairline that he has, because he's bald except for right on his forehead. There's like little wisps of hair, and it looks really strange, but his face makes him look really, really young. I think the artist really needs more work on human anatomy, and overall I was just disappointed with the art. It was pseudo-anime, but it was also kind of lazily done in a lot of panels, and I think the artist needs more work. So this issue was just a big miss for me. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 21, legacy number 186. This is from the 2018 series, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Mark Bagley, inks by Andy Owens, color art by Frank Martin and Eric Arkinga. VC's Clayton Cowles did the letters, cover by Mark Bagley, Andy Owens, and Jason Keith. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. The cover's not bad, but it probably could have been a little more exciting. So Eddie's having a rough time adapting with Dylan. Dylan seems to still hold some resentment. They've been staying with Liz Allen for a couple days with her kid Normie. That's a horrible name. Eddie is asked to visit the Avengers Mountain in the Arctic Circle and meet with the Avengers, but something goes wrong. He starts hearing Carnage's voice in his head, so he needs a little bit of time off to kind of think things through. Captain America gives him an Avengers card that he said he could call him anytime, no questions asked, as he tries to work through things. Now, Eddie still has some of the quiet pills that shuts out the symbiote voice, and he takes some of those, but he just has nightmares of Knull. He decides to get away for a while to a secret island, the Island of Bones, where he once fought Spider-Man, and things don't go well, and now he's stuck on an island. Overall, I'd have to say the story was pretty solid, actually. This is a nice change from the annual and even last issue. A lot more plot and story happens with some good action, especially near the end, and this really looks like it's going to be a pretty fun storyline. So I'm going to recommend this. I thought it was really solid. The art is fantastic. The story was interesting and very fast-paced, and it had enough action to keep me interested in. Unfortunately, the paper quality is garbage, and while the cover price is $4, I think the paper quality really hurts that, but I was really excited by this one. I thought it really did reinvigorate the character of Venom for me, so I'm looking forward to reading the next issue. It's a good change from last issue, which was pretty weak, so we'll see how this one plays out, but yeah, this could be really good. So, strong recommendation on this issue. I thought it was a lot of fun. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 22, legacy number 187. This issue was written by Donny Cates, pencils by Mark Bagley, Andy Owens on inks, color by Frank Martin and Eric Arcaniga, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover art by Mark Bagley, Andy Owens, and Jason Keith. That cover is very, very boring. I get what they're going for. The waves are Venom's costume. It has a very Japanese art look to it, but it's a little too meta, and it makes it look really boring. So Eddie is on the run in his boxer shorts from the symbiote, which has been corrupted by Carnage, kind of. Just go with it. But he's on this island that he tried to kill Spider-Man on. So he actually knows the island really, really well. He lived there for months, and there's all sorts of little caches of weapons and things like that that he can use. Meanwhile, the symbiote is trying very hard to take over all the animal life on the island. Meanwhile, Dylan is having nightmares, and his friend Norman is calling him a weirdo. I wish I'd stop calling him Normie, because he's a little too old for that kind of nickname. And the kid has a bit of a dark secret of his own. Then we jump back over to Eddie, and he is giving 1-4 to the symbiote, but in the end he has to take drastic action, and it's kind of crazy. And we're left with a cliffhanger ending that will forever alter Eddie Brock. Probably. For a little while, anyway. Overall, this was a really solid issue. The art's fantastic. Mark Bagley's a really good artist, and there's some really, really well done panels in here that are just solid work. The symbiote looks great, and the story is really fun. It's a great part of the story arc, and I'm looking forward to reading the next issue. Aside from the cover, I thought the issue was really, really good. The cover is the weakest part. It's not a badly done cover, it's just very distracting. You don't know where your eye is supposed to go, and you're just looking at an island. I mean, who cares? This wouldn't have gotten me to buy the book. And I think you could enjoy this issue without the context of the first issue, because there's a lot of action. You're gonna miss a lot, but you can at least get kind of the gist of the story. So I thought it was a solid installment in this arc, and I'm looking forward to reading the next issue. So I'm going to recommend this. So far, this storyline has been really good. So that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 23, legacy number 188. It's written by Donny Cates, pencils by Mark Bagley, Andy Owens on inks, Frank Martin colorist, VC's Clayton Cowles on letters. I have the Gwen Stacy variant by Humberto Ramos and Edgar Delgado. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis, editor, Nick Lowe, executive editor. First of all, I hate this cover. This is horrible. She looks like a gray alien wearing a wig, and her eyes are off center. Like one has way more space on the side, because if you look at her left eye, it appears slightly larger than her right, and there's like a wide gap in between the two eyes. It looks unsettling. Plus her left arm is thicker than her right arm. Her right arm, which is crossed over in the front, is freakishly long looking, and the other one looks short and stocky. So yeah, that's a garbage cover, and her feet look weird. So Eddie is severely injured after last issue, and he is trying to push himself. He has to cauterize cauterize his wound, and then try and climb this radio tower. Meanwhile, Dylan is playing with his souvenir that he collected, and we get a brief glimpse into his abilities, which you could tell they were setting him up to become this super powerful character. And I don't know about that. It seems a little bit lazy. But Eddie's story is really interesting, and how he combats the symbiote is really good. He has a pretty good plan, which is fairly obvious from early in the book, but the commentary he makes is pretty funny. And the issue leaves on a cliffhanger ending, which looks pretty shocking actually, and I'm really excited to see where next issue goes, because this story's actually been pretty good. The Dylan subplot I don't really care about. I think that's a bit forced. I think they're trying too hard to make Dylan into the new Venom, and it's just really not that interesting, since they're going to all this trouble to make Eddie into a much more interesting character, and it looks like they may just flush it away. But overall, the issue was good, and I am liking the storyline. So we'll see how next issue plays out, but this is a solid recommendation. Don't get the Gwen Stacy cover, it's creepy looking. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 24, legacy number 189. This issue was written by Donny Cates, pencils by Mark Bagley, Andy Owens on inks, Frank Martin color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer. I have the Spider-Woman cover by Rocky Kim, Danny Kazem assistant editor, Devin Lewis editor. The cover's okay, it's an okay pinup, but Spider-Woman doesn't appear in the book, so it's totally pointless. This tells me nothing about the adventure going on, which is really insulting. It's kind of deceptive too. I would say you're getting tricked into buying a book you think would have Spider-Woman in it, but it's not the regular cover, so I guess you're not supposed to feel too tricked. Whatever. So it looks like Eddie is safe for the moment after the events of last issue, and he's recovering, but things are not exactly what they seem. And we learn in reality the Carnage symbiote seems to have taken Eddie. Dylan, meanwhile, creates some sort of portal and goes through it and makes a friend. I don't know what that's about. It's kind of vaguely explained, like it's almost astral projection, but they don't do a very good job of explaining it that he's not physically there. There's kind of a one-line throwaway implying that, but it needed to be explained a little better, because this portal thing's kind of stupid, and it's a lazy MacGuffin they use a lot in comics nowadays because of the X-Men. But overall, the story was pretty decent. It's very middle story, so if you haven't been reading the story arc, it's not going to make a lot of sense. You're not going to understand what happened to Eddie, and why he's damaged the way he is. You're not going to understand Dylan's weird little power thing any more than you're going to be confused about it in this issue. And you're not really going to know what's going on with the symbiotes. So overall, you're going to have read the rest of Venom Island for this to make any sense at all. But it's a decent middle installment in the book. Is it worth $4? No, not even close. But if you're reading it in trade paperback, it'll make a lot more sense and you're not going to feel as ripped off. I ended up paying $6 for this in the back issue bin because I didn't get it off the stand. And I think that was an exorbitant price, especially for such a pointless variant cover. So I would say get this story arc in trade paperback, because that appears to be the way it's being written, like most Marvel books these days, and you'll enjoy it a lot better. But as a single issue, paper quality's trash, and it's all middle story, so you're not going to be able to appreciate it on its own, and I think those are major hindrances to it. So if you're interested in this one, get it in trade. But they do seem to be leading up to the big King in Black storyline pretty well, so I guess there's that. It's a long haul for the storyline and not a lot of payoff in this issue, but there's some really good art. So I did like the interior art. Mark Bagley is still a very talented artist, so at least we have that. Kind of a middle of the road review. It's not worth the price most people are asking for the single issue, but it's a decent installment in the main storyline. Hopefully more things get explained in the next few issues, otherwise it'll be really annoying. But that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 25, legacy number 190. I have the 4th printing, which means they just got lazy with the cover and threw some panels on there from the main book, so cover's a little more action-packed than usual for some reason. This issue was written by Donny Cates, pencils by Mark Bagley, Andy Owen on inks, Frank Martin color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, assistant editor was Danny Cates, Devin Lewis editor. Now there is a backup story written by Dave Michelini, Ron Lim pencils, JP Mayer inker, Eric Arkimga color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer. The main story is basically a summation of events leading up to where we're at in the series. So it goes over Absolute Carnage real quick and the War of the Realms crossovers and then some of the stuff about Knull. And Absolute Carnage seems to be mainly the focus, but we do finally get a summation of how Eddie got off the island and what happened there and how Dylan was a large player in that. Overall, it's a very padded storyline. About the first half of that story could have been ditched because it could have been summed up significantly quicker. Instead, it's just a bunch of panels of Eddie's face as he blathers on. It's a very padded, bloviated section that really didn't need to be there, but it was okay beyond that. The backup story is a flashback story to when Eddie was on the island the first time and thought that he had killed Spider-Man, and he runs into some arms dealers and kills them all. The backup story I think was pretty weak. It was okay, but the art wasn't that good and it looked rushed and sounded kind of rushed. Definitely not Dave Michelini's best work, or Ron Lim's for that matter. So overall, is this worth $6? No, not even close. The fight scene with the Tyrannosaurus and the Carnage symbiote was okay, but there's so much fluff in the beginning of this story. You could seriously cut out 4 or 5 pages. Plus there's no footnoting, so you don't know Absolute Carnage or War of the Realms or anything like that are never directly mentioned by name. So there's no footnotes to tell you this was a miniseries or what issues this occurred in. So if you're using this as a jumping on point, it's a terrible, terrible spot. And while Sleeper's in here and he does do a few things, they don't even identify him by name, I don't think. So there were just a lot of large panels with a lot of fluffy sections in there, which has become kind of a trait of modern Marvel. When you want to look like you have more comic than you do, you create larger panels and pad out the story with a lot of talking, usually over food. And this suffers from that quite heavily. This was overpriced at $6 because while there are extra pages, you could have cut out the backup story and about 5 or 6 pages, probably up to 8 of the main story. That would have brought it down to a regular comic, probably a little shorter. I would say as a wrap up to what had already gone on in the series, it was okay as an end cap, but it was just too much blathering. If the editor had properly done their job, they would have trimmed a lot of this out and stopped with the attempt at a cash grab of a couple extra bucks. Also, the paper quality is really trash, so it's not worth in any respect the price. The art is good in the first story. The backup looked kind of rushed and a little bit lazy overall. So a lot of negatives here, but if you were reading the Venom Island storyline, you'll probably want to read this to find out how it ends. But it was a little predictable and it took a long time to get to it. So I'm really losing faith in the series with books like this. Last issue was a little weaker than some of the others too, but this one is a slap in the face for $6. It is not worth that. So if you're reading this storyline, get it in trade or get it cheap. There's no reason to pay anywhere near $6 for this. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom issue 26, legacy number 191. This issue is written by Donny Cates with art by Iben Coelho and Juan Gideon, color art by Jesus Abertov, and letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. I have the 3rd printing, so the cover's just a pinup out of the book. This is an actual page out of the book, which it's actually pretty good for that. Danny Cates was the assistant editor, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. So Eddie pretty much forgoes his secret identity to get some information from some guy. I don't know what the modern reasoning for that is, why everybody has to not have a secret identity anymore. It kind of ruins some of the storyline concepts, but whatever. But Eddie had to get an address from this guy to take Dylan to see someone. And of course, he doesn't take him to like the Baxter building or anything. No, he takes him to see the Maker at a secret facility. The Maker, who has done pretty horrible things through this entire series to the kid kid and to Eddie. And Eddie goes to see him to get some help with the whole issue of Knull, but the Maker has a few things of his own going on. And while we don't really know the Maker's motives, we do know from a few issues back that he did retrieve something from his home dimension, and that is his own symbiote. Now, Virus shows up to cause some problems. He's got the War Machine armor and a Goblin glider, so he's there to wreak some havoc, and it ends up activating this portal, and we're left with a cliffhanger ending that ties into the Maker. Overall, the issue's okay. I'm not very familiar with Virus, so I didn't really know too much about that. They don't really give you any updates or reference points to work with as to who this person is or what storylines you should check out, because editors are completely useless at Marvel now. But the story was just okay. The fight scene was pretty decent, but in the end, the last few pages looked kind of lazy. There's some real corner cutting on the second to last page where the art looks significantly weaker, like this page was thrown together minutes before it went to press. Otherwise, the art's okay. It's functional. It's not my favorite, but I can see why people like it. It's got a very manga look to it. I just don't like that art style. But the last couple pages look way lazier than the rest. And the pinup page where the cover comes from, that's actually a pretty cool scene. I hate the tongue on Venom, always have, but at least they do a pretty decent job of not going ridiculously overboard with it. So overall, I thought it was a pretty mediocre issue leading to what's probably going to be a very boring storyline, because I don't like the Maker. I think it's a worthless, lazy character that is brought over from a borderline fan fiction sub-imprint of Marvel. But I know that's a pretty unpopular opinion. So I would say this one's worth reading because it does jump into a new storyline, but it doesn't tell you anything about who the Maker is. There's no reference points for that. So if you're just getting into the book, you'll have nothing to work with about who the Maker is, who this Virus guy is, or where you could go look any of that up. And that's really frustrating if you're just getting into the series. So I think this is pretty middle of the road. I would say this is back issue bin material that you could pick up, I would say, for less than cover price, but that's probably not going to happen. $4 seemed exorbitant for what you're getting here. Paper quality's trash. The art's middle of the road at best, and sometimes much, much worse. The colorist did a really good job, though. And the storyline was pretty uninspiring, so I don't know where they're going with this story arc, but it's not off to a great start. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Web of Venom Wraith. This is a one-shot from 2020 from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, art by Guyu Villanova, Dean White, color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles, letters, cover by Kyle Hotz and Dan Brown, Danny Kazem, assistant editor, Devin Lewis, editor, Nick Lowe, executive editor. Cover's pretty good, actually. I thought it was interesting, and it sort of relates to what's going on. It could have been a little more action-oriented, and whatever this whip thing is doesn't really play a part in the story at all. So Wraith is looking for answers about his past and possibly his future and how to get rid of his curse. Now, he had abducted Gamora in Guardians of the Galaxy number 5, that's the 2019 series, in exchange for information from Eros. And the information he gave him was just 2 sets of coordinates and some stuff that he couldn't unlock. And the coordinates of the first location are actually his father's old lab. So he goes there and tries to figure out what's going on and manages to end up at the planet of symbiotes, where he encounters Knull. Now, Knull is just reawoken. We do learn the origin of Knull's sword in this issue, which is sort of a symbiote of some kind, and Wraith learns about something that may be of value to Eddie. Overall, it's not a bad story. The general core concept is good. My problem with it is there's this trend that Donny Cates has where he thinks he's a better writer than he is sometimes, so he gets a little pretentious with it, and he does this thing where he writes really short, abrupt sentences that are borderline fragments and occasionally just thoughts, and it is kind of annoying. And this issue suffers from that quite a bit. And it's supposed to be this sort of intellectual type writing style, and it just doesn't work sometimes. Overall, it was okay. Was it worth $5? Absolutely not. This is a $2 purchase at best, especially with the trash paper quality and the mostly mediocre art. It was a little too abstract and rough looking, and really had a amateur look to it. The colorist did a great job with what they had, and I think the artist has a lot of potential. It just is a very sloppy style. People's bodies look very creepy. The symbiotes did a really good job, but the humanoids don't really look entirely humanoid. It looks very amateurish. So I don't think I'm gonna really recommend paying a lot of money for this issue. This does take place right around issue 26 of the regular Venom series, which is legacy number 191. So while Eddie's in the Venom Beyond storyline, this is leading into King in Black. So if you want to read this, it's a good one-shot overall in a lot of respects, but I think the value for the dollar just isn't there. So I wouldn't pay anywhere near $5 for it. But if you're looking at reading something that's going to add to the King in Black storyline before you read King in Black, this is probably a good one. But like I said, I don't think I'd pay even half cover price for this unless you absolutely had to and you're a diehard completionist. It doesn't add that much beyond learning about Knull's sword and the bit of information that Eddie's going to probably have later on anyway. So I thought it was an okay addition to it, but it's not mandatory reading. So if you can find it cheap, then I'd say pick it up. But there were a lot of problems I had with it otherwise. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 27, legacy number 192. This is part 2 of the Venom Beyond storyline written by Donny Cates, art by Juan Gideon. Jesus Bertov was the color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, executive editor was Nick Lowe. That cover is really boring. It's just a panel out of the book. Eddie and Dylan are in the alternate reality, which is Earth 1610. So here we see a lot of symbols of Knull around, and it looks like the Earth has already been taken over. And while Eddie is fighting with Virus is putting up a heck of a fight, but Eddie's powers are slightly different here because the Venom symbiote is able to connect to a hive mind, which teaches him some things. He's trying to keep his own presence secret at the same time, so it takes him a little bit. So Eddie's on his own for a little bit of the fight with basically just webs. Then he runs into some venomized Avengers, and they manage to take Virus in, but not Eddie. And Eddie meets a sort of resistance group, while Virus meets somebody named Codex who looks a lot like Knull. So we're left with a interesting revelation because this is an alternate universe. Eddie runs into someone he knows. Overall, it's an okay story, but the art is pretty rough looking. I really don't like this manga-ized art style, and sometimes people's faces shift in the way they look, so they look like different people from panel to panel. But the story itself was fine. I just didn't particularly like the art. I don't think it's anything super memorable yet, but it's interesting enough I want to read issue 28. It's just not super compelling as a story yet. They haven't really told us much about the universe, and it's a little slow going on that front. This issue is mostly a fight issue, and it hasn't told me about the universe itself, so Eddie doesn't seem to have all that much curiosity about what's going on around him, and I find that a bit annoying. So hopefully that'll change the next issue, but this is definitely written for the trade paperback, and we'll see how the next issue goes. But it's okay. I don't really think it's worth $4. Paper quality's kind of trash, so it might be worth picking up in trade, but we'll see how the next issue goes. This is obviously leading into King in Black, so if you're looking forward to that storyline, this is just sort of build up, but it takes place in another universe, so it doesn't mean a whole lot just yet. Most likely they're using this as an excuse to introduce some new powers to Venom, which he already has some pretty awesome powers. He's a little bit overpowered as it is, but the powers he gets in this one definitely overpower him a lot more. So we'll see how it plays out though, like I said, and hopefully it'll be good. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 28, legacy number 193. This is part 3 of Venom Beyond, written by Donny Cates, Juan Gideon artist, Jesus Bertov color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, covered by Jeff Shaw and Frank Martin. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. That cover is really cool, even though Venom looks a little fat and has kind of big jugs. Overall, the general idea is really cool, and it does show actual peril and adventure, so really good cover for once. Not just a regular boring pinup. So Codex is trying to get information on who Virus is and where he comes from, and they're starting to figure out that he's not from this universe. And we do learn his identity, and it's not particularly surprising. You could kind of figure it out if you read a couple issues in one of the annuals. Meanwhile, Eddie is making some new friends. It turns out I was wrong, and this is not the Ultimates universe. This is a different one. The Maker went to the Ultimates universe where he's from, and Eddie and Dylan ended up in some smiled future alternate universe. And we learn what happened to the Eddie Brock of this world and who became Venom. We also meet some others of the Resistance, including Peter Parker, Wade Wilson, and Cletus Cassidy, as well as Andy Benton. And of course, there's a big fight with some powerful bad guys, but they're mere copies of the originals, so they're not quite as powerful as the real people. They use an interesting method of escape, and then we find out the big reveal as to who Virus is, and we also learn the secret identity of Codex. Overall, it was a decent installment. There's a fair amount of action. Fight scenes were pretty well done, even though I'm not a fan of this art style at all. I kind of hate this art style. But the artist does have talent. They do understand perspective shots pretty well. A lot of flat panels in this that could have been done a little better, but I don't necessarily hold that against the artist. I think there's enough good perspective shots in here to compensate for that. But the reveals weren't particularly surprising. What I was surprised about was that it was a decent installment. It's not worth $4. It's worth about $2 to me, but as an installment in the storyline, it does progress it very well. You will need to have read the previous issue to get anything out of this. The big reveals won't have any real impact if you haven't read parts 1 and 2, so it's definitely an installment and not a standalone. There are parts of this you would enjoy, but as part of a storyline, it's really going to need to have context for a lot of the plot points to have impact. But overall, I thought it was okay. Paper quality is still garbage because it's Marvel, and again, I hate the art. I think it's amateur hour, but the artist has talent. It's just not a style I like. I don't think it's quite ready for prime time either. There's panels that are very, very good, and then there's some that look really, really lazy. So I don't know if the artist was rushed or if they just need to refine their technique a little more. So I will recommend it, but only if you're going to read the whole Venom Beyond storyline, and almost in a sense the entire series, because otherwise you're going to lose a little bit of the context for the meta story as well as the Venom Beyond storyline. So kind of a middle of the road review. So I know that's not particularly helpful, but that's the best I could give you on this without giving too much away. The storyline is okay, but you're not really going to get a whole lot out of this issue without having read at least part 2. So I'd say get it in trade if you can find it cheap, but back issues, I wouldn't pay more than a couple bucks for this. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, there are links in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 29, legacy number 194. It's written by Donny Cates, art by Luke Ross. Jesus Bertov was the color artist, VC's Clayton Cowell letterer. Cover art by Ryan Stegman, JP Mayer, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. Now that cover's really good. I like that a lot. It's got peril, it's got action, very well done, more than just a lazy pinup. So we learn how things went south on this Earth and how Codex was able to take over and spawn a bunch of symbiotes that controlled everybody and basically assimilated most of the planet. And Eddie is trying to have kind of a heart-to-heart with Annie, and she says some really mean things about and kind of to Dylan, so lots of emotional stuff. But then we find out Scorpion's here and things go crazy pretty quick. Now the fight scene is very short, and we learn why Scorpion is mad at Eddie, which is because of what happened in Absolute Carnage, which actually does kind of surprise Eddie. I don't think he really thought through his actions on that front. But overall, this is a lot of backstory and a whole lot of padding. There's a lot of fluff in here that's disguised as like interpersonal communication. It comes off a little bit like a Lifetime movie. I don't think Donny Cates is real good at writing romantic relationship stuff, but it was a little dragged out anyway, and that I think hurt it more than anything. It wasn't very concise. Another problem is there are a lot of large panels in here that are really designed to take up space more than anything else and make it look like the issue's longer longer than it is. If the panels had been smaller, this would have been probably 8 or 9 pages shorter. But overall, it's okay middle story. It's just a fluffy padding issue. There's a few things in here that are relevant to the advancement of the plot. Otherwise, it's just world building. It's an okay standalone, but it really does suffer from the fact that since this doesn't happen on 616, then it's really largely irrelevant. But in the context of the actual storyline, it's okay. But it's really not something I'm going to run out and get. I wouldn't pay more than a couple of bucks for it. It's definitely not worth the $4 cover price. Paper quality's crap. The art's a mixed bag. Some of it's good, some of it's really mediocre. The artist is a lot better than last issue though, so I'll give him that. But there were a few panels that I didn't care for. Mostly on Eddie's face. I don't think he draws beards very well. Otherwise, it was a better issue than last issue, but still mostly middle story with a lot of padding. So don't pick it up unless you're gonna read the whole storyline. I don't think it's gonna make much sense without it. You could probably enjoy it because there's a lot of world building, but if you're looking for action and adventure, there's like 2 pages of it in here. So far this storyline is really slow going. We'll see how it goes next issue though, but in the meantime, I think a lot of this storyline is better read as a very inexpensive trade paperback. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 30, legacy number 195. This issue was written by Donny Cates, art by Luke Ross, Hosea Bertov, color artist, VC's Clayton Cowles, letterer, cover by Ryan Stegman, JP Mayer, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis, editor. Cover's okay, but it doesn't really tell you anything about the story, and that really doesn't look like Eddie in the Venom suit there. So if you haven't been reading this is the final issue of the Venom Beyond storyline. They finally tell us what Earth they're on. It's 1051. And the attempt to use Scorpion backfires on Codex, and he realizes that there is somebody else like him. Meanwhile, both Otto Octavius and Reed Richards come to the conclusion that the Mark III War Machine armor somehow was able to capture the schematics of the interdimensional travel machine, and they decide to go assault the Codex compound to try and recover the armor to get Eddie and the others home. Virus, of course, stabs them all in the back, which is predictable. And then the power of love wins. And Eddie is stuck there for a year and some change before returning to the Earth of 616, and then it leads into King in Black. This issue came out the same month as Web of Venom Empire's End, which you should probably read before reading King in Black issue 1. Overall, this issue was a real disappointment. The way the story ended was ludicrous and like a Hallmark movie. Actually, a little less thought out than that. The art is pretty rough and at times just straight terrible. It looks very amateurish, like an indie book, and I can't believe this made it into a mainstream Marvel book. At times the artist betrays that they are pretty talented and can draw. Other times people have weird long necks, or their bodies look giant, or they look posed like action figures. So I think the artist really needs to take some more time and hone their craft, and they'll look a little bit more like a cross between John Romita Jr. and Ryan Stegman. But for now, I think they got a little bit of work to do. And I have to say the storyline was a real disappointment. I did not have fun reading it. I thought it was largely boring and a bit cliched, especially the ending issue here. This was just incredibly lazy. So this was a real weak storyline. Could have been a lot cooler. The premise is fine, but the execution of it was really weak. So I don't know why Donny Cates was phoning it in this time, but this storyline was pretty disappointing. So I would say just pass on the Venom Beyond storyline. It just was not very good. And anything good that was in the storyline is defeated by the really insipidly weak saccharine ending of love conquers all. So I'm not going to recommend this. This was trash. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Web of Venom, Empyre's End. This is a one-shot from Marvel Comics in 2021. This issue was written by Clay McLeod Chapman with art by Guy Villanova, color art by Frank Marta. VC's Clayton Cowles was the letterer, cover art by Philip Tan and J. David Ramos, assistant editor Donny Cates, editor Devin Lewis, executive editor was Nick Lowe. Cover's really good. It got me to buy the issue, but coming in at $5, I was expecting quite a bit. Paper quality is the usual trash Marvel uses, but inside we find out that the Skrulls have picked up a escape capsule, and inside is Talos. Now Talos, you might remember, is one of the only Skrulls that can't shapeshift in the Marvel Comics. They've changed that in the movie version, but in the comics he cannot shapeshift. But that doesn't make him any less formidable. So it turns out he was leading a mission to find out what was going on with some planets that had lost contact, and these were research outposts, nothing militaristic, or at least didn't have military weapons or ships defending them. They were just outposts doing various research. And when they get there, they find some life pods, but it's a trap by the symbiotes, and the symbiote gets on board and starts hunting the crew. Now the crew is made up of very F-list characters that you probably haven't heard of. Ethan Edwards, Tarna, Avram, Kea, Milans, but they're characters that have been around. One used to be a Starjammer, one a failed hero on Earth who's also a Skrull, and of course Talos. Well, when the symbiotes get aboard, they start attacking the crew and trying to pick them off, and the crew tries to escape, and of course this is a warning from Knull, and we get a fairly predictable end. Overall, it's an okay story actually. I thought it was pretty well done as far as story structure. It has a very Alien feel to it, so if you've seen Alien, it does have that vibe, but it's a little bit more condensed because it is only one issue. It probably could have been a 2, 3, maybe even a 4-issue miniseries, but they were really ramping up toward King in Black, and this is just a filler on the way to that. I don't know if any of these characters are going to appear in King in Black. I rather doubt it, so it's kind of a one-off, almost throwaway issue, but for what it is, it's not bad. I'm not a big fan of the art style. There were a lot of panels that were really well done and some that looked really rough, so it was a bit middle of the road there. I think the artist has some potential. Knull looks silly, and there were a few panels where even Talos looks pretty silly, but Skrulls usually look kind of silly. Overall though, I didn't have a problem with it. Is it worth $5? No, absolutely not. But if you pull it out of a dollar bin or $2, I'd say it's worth it. Anywhere close to half or under cover price would be worth reading and snatch it up, because it is a self-contained story. It does have a lead into King in Black, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. It's a decent enough space horror story that it can hold its own. That being said, I can only recommend it if you find it discounted. The art is not bad, not spectacular. The story's fun, but not terribly original. There's some really cool sequences in here with like the opening of one of the escape pods, stuff like that are really cool, but it's not worth $5. It's not even a particularly important seeming tie-in to King in Black. It's just a money grab, but it's not one of the worst ones Marvel's ever done. So that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at King in Black, Issue 1. This is a 5-part miniseries from Marvel Comics from 2021. It's written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer inker, Frank Martin color artist, Clayton Cowles letterer, covered by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor was Donny Cates, editor Devin Lewis, executive editor Nick Lowe. Cover's pretty good, does relate, but it's mainly just a pinup. So the King in Black has arrived. The Avengers set out to try and stop him and evacuate major areas, and while the initial volley of exploding Kree ships that they had in the upper atmosphere left over from Empyre did stop some of the monsters, it didn't stop anywhere near enough. Eddie locks Dylan in this safe room that Spider-Man had left over from his encounters with Ezekiel. Probably should have been footnoted. The X-Men show up to help out too. No sign of Thor though, and even worse, Knull has some old Celestials that are wrapped up in symbiotes. Sentry shows up to help, help, and that does not go well at all, and things are looking really grim for the heroes. It looks like the Avengers are down. Venom decides to try and do something kind of rash, and it backfires horribly, and Eddie is in a very bad predicament at the end of the book. Now, the cliffhanger ending was good, very comic book, I'll give them that. There is a really good timeline and explanation of various things that happened in the back of the book, as well as a checklist for the reading order. I'm not going to read most of that stuff, but overall, the checklist and the background information were pretty helpful. There's a good timeline there to kind of keep readers up to date that may have missed some stuff. But if you haven't been reading the Venom series up till now, there's going to be a lot of missing context as to how things got here. But overall, it was actually a pretty good issue. It's a real bummer issue too. A lot of bad things happened to a lot of heroes, but it looks like one hero may have actually died, and it really left off on a good cliffhanger. This was actually a surprisingly good issue. I was really worried after reading Venom Beyond, but this one has been pretty solid. And at $6, I expect it to be a lot worse, but it's actually not bad. Paper quality's good, cover quality's real nice, shockingly. Not a big fan of Stegman's art. I think it looks a little boxy at times, but Venom looks really cool. So I'd recommend this. I thought it was pretty good so far. Hopefully the next issues are good, and we'll see how they go. But for now, this is a recommend. It's a pretty thick issue with a lot of story going on, so there's a lot in the issue, and that really surprised me because Marvel's been really lax on the actual storytelling, where they tend to pad things out with a bunch of unnecessary scenes. There's not a whole lot of that in here. A little bit, but not nearly what Marvel usually does. So I'm going to recommend this. So far, the miniseries is off to a great start. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom, issue 31, legacy number 196. This issue was written by Donny Cates, Ivan Coelho, artist, Jesus Bertov, colorist, VC's Clayton Cowles, letterer. I have the variant edition, which is the nullified one, the Francisco Herrera and Fernanda Rizio cover. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis, editor, Nick Lowe, executive editor. Cover's boring. It's just a lazy pinup. This wouldn't even be qualified for a trading card. So this issue is a little recording by Rex Strickland that was recorded during the events of issue 1, and it has Rex narrating some stuff about Eddie, kind of recapping his life, I guess, while Eddie falls from a very tall building as part of King in Black issue 1. Now, this issue came out around the same time as issue 1 of King in Black miniseries, so it mostly just has to kill some space before they go into issue 2, and that's all this is. The main part that's interesting in here that's actually relevant is this little 3-page thing with Dylan where he's being an obnoxious little jerk and harassing Iron Man while Iron Man's in the middle of a fight, and he's trying to find out what's going on with Eddie, and then he realizes what's going on a TV screen. He even tries to contact the symbiote and gets booted out, so that was probably the most interesting thing. This issue could easily be skipped. There's not a lot to it. It's an okay read, but I feel kind of cheated for $4. Paper quality's garbage. The story's really fast-paced and very simple, and really Eddie does way too much in that entire bit of falling that is just to a ludicrous degree of time and cohesive thought process while falling to your death. So overall, I thought it was a pretty lazy issue, so I'm not going to recommend this one. It looks more like this issue was released to fill space because they had to have an issue come out, and instead of having a flashback adventure or something, they just decided to run with this whole thing of what happens while Eddie's falling, and it really just doesn't work out. So this was a big miss for me. The art is okay for the style it's in, but I'm not a huge fan. Not a real big fan of this artist. It's definitely better work than Ivan Coelho's done before, but still not very good. So nothing here really hits. It's just kind of a lazy, half thought of storyline. So easily skipped, not really relevant to anything else going on. It's just filler. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at King in Black issue 2. This issue was written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer, Frank Martin on colors, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. This cover's pretty good actually, and it does relate to what's going on. So after the events of last issue, Eddie is in very, very bad shape. Spider-Man couldn't get to him in time to save him, and in fact they have to flee. Human Torch gives them some great cover so that they can get out of there and stabilize Eddie, but Spider-Man has to go break the news to Dylan, and that's actually a really touching scene. Meanwhile, the remaining heroes from the Avengers, FF, and, well, the X-Men aren't really helping anymore. They're trying to figure out what to do. Namor shows up and offers to help, despite the fact that nobody invited him per se, except maybe Sue Storm, but they do need his help, and he's experienced in fighting in darkness, which is something that a lot of the heroes apparently aren't. So Iron Man comes up with a plan, which means that they're going to have to recruit some people they wouldn't normally work with, including Dracula, the Black Tide, and even the Kingpin. Iron Man's plan also involves taking over one of the symbiotes using the Extremis, which was a pretty cool throwback, but things don't go quite the way that everybody expects. We're left with a really shocking cliffhanger ending that should be pretty interesting to where it's going. Now, overall, this was a really solid issue. The art's good for the style it's in. It's not my favorite, as I've said many times with the Venom series. The story is really solid, and even the cover's good. Coloring's great. Lots of good use of the characters, good references to past storylines, that sort of thing. A lot of good character appearances. Didn't have any real problems with that. My only real complaint with the issue is they do this thing where they like to damage Spider-Man's mask and have little tufts of hair poking out and not letting him change the mask because it's silly. Hee hee. It's not silly. It's stupid and annoying. So I'd have to say this was a solid issue and I would absolutely recommend it. It was a very good installment in the series. It made me want to buy the next issue, which thankfully I already have. So this is an all-around recommendation. Thought it was fun. There is a preview for Venom 32 in here as well. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 32, legacy number 197, written by Donny Cates, art by Ivan Cavello, Jesus Bertov colorist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, cover art by Ivan Cavello and Jesus Bertov, assistant editor Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. So after the events of King in Black 1 and 2, Eddie is in this sort of limbo state and he's not sure what's going on. We quickly find out that he's not a ghost per se. This version of Eddie is actually a codex inside of the collective. The Hive has codexes of all the people, just like the people had codexes of the symbiotes. So he runs into Rex, and they are able to kind of have some free thought in the, I don't know, matrix, I guess, of the Hive. And that's because they had symbiotes on for a long time. And Eddie had his for years. So he doesn't realize what's happened to him. He only remembers falling, so Rex has to show him. But the two of them are not alone, and there's a surprise guest at the end of the issue. Overall, this is an interesting side story, but it's just a distraction from the fact that they really had nothing they could do between issues 1, 2, and 3 of King in Black because of what happens in those issues. So it's an interesting side tangent that might play out into something more interesting, but for now it's okay. It's not the best. It's better than Venom Beyond, but it's really not the best work we've seen. It looks like it's more filler issues. But for what it is, it's not bad. If you're going to pick up King in Black, this might be worth as a supplement to read, but I wouldn't pay more than a couple bucks for it. I don't think it's actually going to be worth that as far as reading value goes. So I'd say it's a skippable issue in the run, but it is a decent read. It's just not mandatory reading for the storyline to be really enjoyed, I don't think. So we'll see how the next issue plays out. Could be pretty fun, but in the meantime, it's worth reading, but it's not worth tracking down. If you come across it, fine, but if not, I've read better, I've read worse. The cover is really good though, and it does kind of relate, but Eddie's never in the symbiote. He is mostly just running around in his underwear, and I don't think that really helps to be deceptive like that, where it implies that you're wearing the costume when you're not. Another strike against the book, but an interesting story, but just nothing spectacular. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at King in Black issue 3. This is a miniseries from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer, colors by Frank Martin, letters by Clayton Cowles, cover art by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. So after the events of the first two issues, it's not looking good for the heroes. Spider-Man and Wolverine have to escort Dylan out, and Dylan starts blasting away some of the symbiotes. He frees Captain America, and in a really stupid scene, he catches Cap's shield. Sure, why not? But then Knull takes a personal interest in what's going on and tries to take out Dylan. Thankfully, Thor finally shows up from whatever he was doing and goes one-on-one with Knull and does really well, actually, for quite a while, but the tides change quickly in these kind of events. The symbiote that Iron Man freed is a bit more cooperative finally, and that ends up in a Celestial and Celestial battle, and at the end of the issue, we have a cliffhanger ending as somebody new enters the fray. Overall, this was a really good issue. I liked it better than last issue. My major complaint is I had to buy 2 copies of this because the first copy I got was missing over half the book. Great quality control you got there, Marvel. At least the paper quality is slightly better than usual. Cover quality is way better. So for the $5 cover price, it's not a bad purchase. Unfortunately, these go for about 8 to 10 now, as I unfortunately found out. And I'm really mad that I had to buy 2 copies of it because they don't have any real quality control apparently at Marvel. But otherwise, I will recommend it. It has been pretty good. This issue is definitely the best one so far, and we'll see how the 4th issue goes. But I don't think it's worth $8. It might be worth $4 or $5, but beyond that, if you're really looking for this book, I would say get it in trade. That seems to be the best way to enjoy a lot of the mini-series these days, is to get it cheap in trade paperback, because it's going to be more cost effective that way. So if this is something you're thinking about picking up, get the trade paperback, and I would absolutely recommend it. It's been pretty fun, but you're going to enjoy it a lot more if you've been reading the Venom series. So heads up on that. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out, you can share it on your social media or go down in the description and click on one of the support links down there. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom issue 33, legacy number 198. This issue was written by Donny Cates, art by Iben Coelho, colors by Jesus Bertov, VC's Clayton Cowles on letters. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. Now I have the variant cover with Venom on it, and it's okay, it's just a pinup though. Spider-Man has a heart-to-heart with Dylan. This issue takes place during issue 3 of King in Black, so some of this early sequence with Spider-Man and Dylan is an extended version of the scene that we saw in that issue. Now Rex and Flash and Eddie are in some sort of hive, they think, but then some of the heroes that are there start disappearing and this large portal thing opens up. Eddie figures out that they're in some sort of purgatory zone and that this isn't actually part of the hive, but going through the portal leads to the God Hive. Flash ends up on a special mission to try and break free some of the symbiotes that are not under Knull's control anymore, that are being sort of held hostage, but that gets the attention of some trouble for Eddie, who is still running around in his underwear. Overall, it was a really good issue. There's a lot of story here, and the last couple issues make a lot more sense now, so you kind of have to have read issues 31 and 32 to really get the most out of this and the King in Black storyline. Otherwise, a lot of this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. If you're not reading King in Black and the previous issues, this issue is pretty well worthless. There's a little bit of validation where Flash has to tell Eddie how awesome he is, but it does kind of relate to what's going on and Eddie's sense of self-doubt about whether or not he's actually a hero, and that's been kind of a theme throughout the book, but it comes off as a bit pandering if you haven't read the entire run of Venom so far. But like I said, overall it was a solid issue. I didn't have much of a problem with anything. The art's not too bad. It's some of Coelho's better art. He still needs to work on faces a little bit, but beyond that, pretty good book. So I'll recommend this one if you're gonna read the entire storyline for King in Black and the related Venom issues. Otherwise, it's gonna make 0 sense. But I would try and pick it up for less than $4. Paper quality's trash. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, or you could just share the video on your social media. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at King in Black issue 4. It's part of the 5-part miniseries from Marvel Comics, written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer, Frank Martin color artist, Beastie's Clayton Cowell was the letterer. I have the regular cover by Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, editor Devin Lewis, Nick Lowe executive editor. So Dylan is trapped in the hive with Knull, who is basically trying to lure him, and somebody else is poking around trying to get into his mind, and Dylan uses his abilities to free a bunch of the heroes and injure Knull in the process. Now the person getting in his mind is Jean Grey, who apparently the X-Men decided, they should actually get involved at some point other than just one team. So they let one of the Omega level mutants actually do something. Nice of the Ethno State to do that. In the meantime, Dylan is doing all the heavy lifting, and Jean manages to probe into Knull's mind while he's injured and learn of the opposite of Knull, who's been alluded to throughout this storyline, that there is in fact an opposite of him. And that dichotomy allows one of the cosmic heroes to show up and grab the light and bring it into the earth. Now this Enigma creature is one that's actually been around the Marvel Universe for a very long time, and we've seen way before Knull, and they've just given him a larger role. And we are left with a pretty dramatic cliffhanger ending that looks really good. Overall, this was actually a pretty good issue. I think it was a little bit overly dramatic, trying to use a lot of players at one time, but it is a pretty fun issue, and it does make use of a relatively obscure character that hasn't really been a major player in the MCU in a long time, and was always critically underused. So pretty cool to see that. Was it worth $5? I didn't feel cheated. I was a little annoyed that the X-Men are now looking like major players, even though they haven't done crap through this entire thing. And now Jean Grey just shows up and is like, I'm here to save everybody. Yeah, well, you guys have been cloistered away in your little fatherland for so long. A little better late than never, I guess. You sent one little team and haven't done much beyond that, so thanks. Otherwise, it was a pretty solid issue, and it looks like the fight against Knull is finally going in the direction of the heroes. So we'll see how it plays out, but until then, I'll recommend this. I think this is going to be better read as a trade paperback than as single issues, and it'll probably be a lot cheaper too to find a discount copy of the trade than try and track down all the single issues. But we'll see how it plays out. I thought the cover was okay, but most of these X-Men don't really do anything in here. Jean does all the heavy lifting. Wolverine's barely even in the book. Scott's in it for maybe a page. Same with Storm. Magneto's not in here at all. So having the X-Men on the cover's kind of deceiving. But like I said, the interior art's okay. Nothing major to complain about there. Perspective shots were real good. So soft recommendation, like I said, get it in trade rather than track the individual issues down. It'll be higher quality. They are using better cover paper on the books, but that doesn't really justify it when you're going to end up spending $25 on the single issues most likely, so you might as well just buy the trade paperback. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, you can share the video on your social media or check out the links below for other ways to support me. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at King in Black Captain America issue 1. This is a 2021 one-shot from Marvel Comics written by Danny Lore, art by Mirko Kolak, Stefano Landi, Roj Antonio, and Nico Leon. Color art by Eric Arciniga. Letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. Cover art by Salvador LaRocca and Guru EFX. Assistant editor was Martin Biro, editor Alana Smith, Tom Brevoort, executive editor. So Bucky and Falcon are trying to do something. It's a little vague at first, but they have an idea to shoot fire out of Falcon's wings and use some stun grenades to fight off some of Knull's creatures. And that's when Captain America enters the fray. This takes place after King in Black issue 4 and before issue 5. So Cap is trying to help out, but he is delayed by self-doubt and these seeming hallucinations. And that's because he had been under the influence of Knull, and it's causing him a lot of self-doubt out for some reason, very unlike Captain America. And that's kind of the crux of the story, is him overcoming this voice in his head, and he needs Bucky and Falcon to validate him in order for that to happen. It's an okay written one-shot. The art is a real mixed bag. A lot of this is very amateur hour and shouldn't be in a Marvel book. It should be in like a Dynamite book or something like that, one of the smaller publishers, because it is just all over the place. Some pages and panels look really good, others look very, very weak. But overall, it's not even remotely necessary for the furtherment of the King in Black storyline. It's just a cash grab at $5, which if you pay anywhere near $5 for this, you're getting ripped off. This is a dollar bin book easily. Like I said, the writing's okay for what it is, which is about Cap overcoming self-doubt. It's just out of character for Captain America to be doing that. And he talks a lot about how he's a symbol and people use that for their own nefarious ends. It's all very navel-gazing and stuff that's been overdone quite a bit when Ta-Nehisi Coates was writing Captain America, as well as lots of other modern writers. So this is just a completely unnecessary book that was just a quick cash grab for Marvel. Cover's really good. Beyond that, I don't think it's worth reading. It's a very unnecessary installment in the King in Black storyline, like so many of the ancillary books are. So I would say skip this one. Captain America is relatively heroic at the end, but overall it seems out of character, and it's just a uninspiring story. Not a necessary installment in the mini-series for King in Black, and not particularly something I would seek out. And that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, or share the video on your social media, or both. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at King in Black Spider-Man issue 1. This is a 2021 one-shot from Marvel Comics, written by Jed MacKay, pencils by Michelle Bandini, inks by Michelle Bandini and Elisabetta D'Amaco, colors by Eric Arcaniga. There's a backup story by Jed MacKay with art by Alberto Albuquerque, colors by Rochelle Rosenberg. Letters for both stories was VC's Joe Caramanga. Cover art by Carlos Gomez and Jesus Bertov, assistant editor Danny Kazem, editor Devin Lewis, Nick Lowe, executive editor. I like the cover, it's really good. Doesn't really apply here, but it is a good cover that sort of relates. So Spider-Man's having a little panic attack and blaming himself for everything, but we quickly get past that, thankfully, because navel gazing is boring. And Spider-Man goes to save some old lady that he thinks is being abducted by one of the dragons, but it turns out to be Reptile, who's a relatively new hero that they're trying to make into a thing. And they decided to have a little team up to get this old lady, Mrs. Volkov, to safety. Peter and the kid both agree that they're not really going to be able to do much about the big colossal threat, but they might be able to save this one old lady and a few other civilians. So they're trying to get her to Staten Island, and they end up on a ferry that is being attacked by a giant dragon thing, and Reptile turns into a big fish monster because he can turn into dinosaurs, and the people on the ferry hook up a electro lance to try and stop the thing. The backup story is just Reptile being promoted a little bit, talking about himself. There's no reference points as to where some of these story points happened, so I assume they're in like Avengers Academy or something like that. But obviously this is a prelude to the Reptile book series that came out in 2021, and that's really obvious with the backup story. It's pretty worthless, and the art's garbage. Primary story, the art's okay. It definitely has a very manga influence, especially when you see Mrs. Volkov. She looks like a stereotype old lady from Japan, and she kind of talks like a stereotype as well. Even though her name sounds strangely Russian, she seems to talk like an anime old lady. Overall, the main story was pretty good. I thought it was pretty fun. It gets a little navel-gazing at the beginning, but thankfully they get past that and get into the primary adventure aspects. So I thought it was good, but it's not $5 good. Not even close. Pull this out of a dollar bin, $2 at the most. Beyond that, it's not worth anywhere near the cover price, but at least this one was a lot better than the Captain America one-shot. This has a complete story, and it's pretty fun, even though it's obviously to promote Reptile's series that was coming up at the time. I don't find that character all that interesting. His power base is kind of cool, but he seems a little annoying and very much one of the inserts that you see too much of in modern comics. So I'm not really interested in Reptile, but I did find this issue to be quite fun as far as like a dollar bin book would go. So beyond paying a couple bucks for it, you can skip it. It's not really essential to the King in in Black storyline at all, but it is a fun sidetrack that takes place between issues 4 and 5 of King in Black. So like I said, if you find it cheap, then I'd recommend it. Beyond that, you could just sort of ignore it. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, or you can share the video on your social media too. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Venom, issue 34, legacy number 199. This issue is written by Donny Cates, art by Ivan Coelho, Jesus Bertov colorist, VC's Clayton Cowles letterer, covered by Ivan Coelho and Jesus Bertov. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. This is part of the King in Black storyline. It's a loose tie-in, and it picks up where it left off. Knull is got Eddie and they're fighting, but thankfully Eddie runs into an old friend and is able to escape back into the real world. And that's when the events from King in Black number 4 kick in, and we find out that Eddie's been chosen. There are several pages in here that are spoilers for what happened in King in Black number 4, because they do correlate the timeline pretty well, and we might have the resurrection of a dead hero. Overall, this was actually a really solid issue. It tied in really well to the storyline. You don't need to read these issues to enjoy King in Black, but you do need to read King in Black in order to really get the most out of this. Like I said, it was really well written. It was pretty fun. The art's okay. Not a huge fan of Ivan Coelho's art, but he does the symbiotes really well. Cover's really good too, even though it doesn't really relate to anything going on in the story. It is a really good cover. So I think the story's picking up quite a bit, and the possible resurrection at the end was really cool too. So we'll see how the next installment goes. The storyline picks up in King in Black number 5 before coming back to Venom 35. But I'd have to say this was a solid issue. It really tied the storyline together really well, and it made more cohesive sense reading them back to back than it would have if you just grabbed a random issue. If you just pick this one up on its own, it's not going to make a lot of sense, and a lot of the important stuff that happens is going to really lose its impact. So I would say pick this up as part of the story arc for King in Black within the Venom series and the mini-series of King in Black. You don't need this to enjoy King in Black, but you do need King in Black to enjoy this one to its fullest. But overall, decent book. The paper quality is trash, so I'd recommend getting it in trade paperback. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at King in Black issue 5. This is a mini-series from Marvel Comics written by Donny Cates, pencils by Ryan Stegman, inks by J.P. Mayer and Ryan Stegman, color art by Frank Martin and Jason Keith. VC's Clayton Cowles did the letters. Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer, and Frank Martin did the cover. Assistant editor was Danny Kazem, Devin Lewis editor, Nick Lowe executive editor. So the Silver Surfer shows up to help fight Knull, and it looks like some of the heroes are back and they're ready to jump into action, but Venom shows up with his newfound power base, and he combines Thor's hammer with the Silver Surfer's surfboard through the magic of storytelling and proceeds to go completely insane on the bad guys. And he also goes after Knull, of course, which leads to a big knockdown drag out where Eddie even has to fight a Sentinel. Thankfully, with his newfound cosmic powers, he is able to equal Knull quite handily, even going beyond that, and we get a really solid resolution. We even get some follow-up on Blade and the vampires, and things kind of return to status quo except for Eddie, who now has some serious power. He also has to kind of deal with Dylan and the corruption that is within him before the power that was in him leaves. But now he has a new role, and it's interesting to see where this might go, but it was a good resolution. I enjoyed the book. I thought it was fun. It wasn't the greatest thing, but it was pretty solid, and I thought the miniseries was a lot of fun, but you really have to have read a lot of the Venom books in order to get the most out of this. Otherwise, it'll probably feel like a pretty fun book, but you'll miss a lot of the storyline for what led up to all of this if you haven't been reading all 35 issues of Venom and probably Absolute Carnage. And probably a lot of one-shots as well. But I thought it was good, and they did a real good job bringing Eddie back and possibly another hero and utilizing a somewhat lesser-known hero, but they changed him pretty significantly significantly for the purposes of this story, and I think it's not a bad change, but we'll see how they use it in the future. I don't want to give too much away because that is kind of a major spoiler for issues 3 and 4. But yeah, I thought the book series was good, and I thought it was worth a read, but like I said, if you're not going to read the entire run of Venom for this era, then it's really not worth it. You're not going to get the most out of it, and the story beats and impacts will have a lot less effect, and a lot of the elements you're going to just be like, what is this about? So to leave you with more questions if you don't read the Venom 1 through 35 as well. On that front, I would say try and get this in some kind of omnibus or trade paperback collected work with the Venom stuff as well, and that'll make it a little bit more interesting. Unfortunately, there are some pretty weak storylines in the Venom series, so that's a bit of a trade-off. But like I said, I enjoyed this. I thought it was good, and I have read the Venom books, so I think it really had a much bigger impact by having read those books. So take that for what you will. And the art is pretty solid throughout. If you like Stegman's art, this is some of his better work. I thought it worked really well for what they were doing. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, share it on your social media, and subscribe if you haven't. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Venom issue 35, legacy number 200. This is the final issue from the 2018 series. This was written by Donny Cates with Philip Kennedy Johnson on pages 40 through 50. Pencils by Ryan Stegman, Cave Walker, Danielo S. Bayruth, Ron Lim, Guyo Villanova, Gerardo Sandoval, and Mark Bagley. Inks by J.P. Mayer, Jay Liston, Kev Walker, Danielo Bayruth, Scott Hanna, Guyo Villanova, Gerardo Sandoval, Victor Nava, and John Dell. Colors by Frank Martin, Chris O'Halloran, Jim Campbell, Matt Milla, Alex Sinclair, Chris Sotomayor, and Richard Eisnove. Letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. Cover by Ryan Stegman, JP Merritt, and Frank Martin. Assistant editor Danny Kazem, edited by Devin Lewis. Executive editor Nick Lowe. Cover's okay, pretty good. It does kind of relate to what's going on. So Eddie is now in charge of the hive mind, and he has basically set them free. They're no longer slaves. He has them doing good works, restoring some of the things they broke, meeting with Thor, that sort of thing, discussing various things with important people. Well, it's taking a toll on Eddie because he's not actually in these bodies, his mind is. So he sits on this throne in the basement of this townhouse, and now he walks with a cane. And in most of the stories, he has white hair, but in the second one, he goes from white to blonde again, so who knows. Meanwhile, Dylan is hanging out with the symbiote, and Sleeper is taking the form of a cat and acting like one. Eddie meets with Spider-Man, even though he doesn't have any money and won't pay for lunch. And it just sort of goes like that for a while. We learn that the Maker is up to something, and that's obviously setting up things for a future storyline, and it looks like there may be an invasion from the Ultimates universe in the MCU's future. We also get a hint as to what's going on with a certain resurrected hero from a few issues ago, and we learn that a bunch of symbiotes are still on Earth, and they're being hunted down by guardsmen. Why isn't really explained, it's just a storyline setup, and Dylan has to stop Jack-o'-lantern because they can't stop using that guy for some reason, and that means that he's bonding with the symbiote. So Dylan is going to be taking over as Venom, it looks like. Overall, this was just an end piece. It's vastly overpriced at $10. I won't pay anywhere near that much for it if I were to buy it again. The art is an incredibly diverse mess. Most of it is not that good and overrated. There's some decent art in here. You could tell when Mark Bagley was working on it, but overall, I would have to say that this just really didn't add anything new to it other than some plot hooks for the next series. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. It wasn't really anything super compelling. It was just a bunch of vignettes kind of stuck together that really didn't transition smoothly from one story to the next. So it was jumping around from good story to mediocre story, and they're all very short and loosely stitched together. This would have been better as one solid, cohesive narrative at a regular size issue and cut out all the fluff and attempts at being grandiose. And then it would have been a lot better. But then they couldn't have charged you $10. But the paper quality's okay, the cover quality's really good. It does have perfect binding, but the glue doesn't seem to be that spectacular. So I don't know how well these are going to hold up, but I definitely would not pay anywhere near $10. $5 tops, and even that is stretching it for me. So I'd recommend getting this one either in part of a trade paperback or as a dollar bin pickup, because I don't think it's worth anywhere near the $10 they're asking. It's not that it's a bad issue, it just really didn't add anything new other than some setup for plot threads of next series. And that's always kind of insulting to do that instead of just wrapping up the series nicely with a good little bow on it and kind of restore things back to starting point for the next team. Instead, they threw all these dangling plot threads out there that, quite frankly, don't interest me. So like I said, just pick it up out of a discount bin or get it in trade with the King in Black storyline. It'll most likely be in there. Beyond that, it didn't really add much to it and was a bit disappointing, so I'm not really going to recommend it unless you can find it cheap. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, hope to see you on the next one.